Good morning, most welcome to the Africa House. It's a great pleasure and honor. And of course, I am overwhelmed by being surrounded by this very distinguished presence and being on this podium with the distinguished panel to very distinguished leaders in Africa, pride of African women, Her Excellency Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, and Her Excellency Ambassador Salma Malika Haddadi, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, and we're also joined by distinguished Minister Fabrice David, Minister of Agro-Industry, Food Security, Blue Economy and Fisheries of Mauritius. And online, we were supposed to be joined by our dear sister, USG Cristina Duarte, Under Secretary General and Special Advisor on Africa. Unfortunately, the connection is not established yet. However, we hope that she can join us at some moment if this happens. But of course, we are joined also by distinguished ministers from sisterly countries. So, Excellencies, distinguished ministers, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure on behalf of the African Union Permanent Observer Mission to the United Nations to warmly welcome you to Africa Day at the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development and to the official launch of the Africa Sustainable Development Report 2026. We are particularly honored by the presence of such a distinguished gathering of leaders and partners. Your participation reflects our shared commitment to advancing the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Agenda 2063 through stronger partnerships, coordinated action, and African-led solutions. Today's meeting comes at an important moment as we approach the final stretch toward 2030. Africa remains determined to accelerate progress despite the multiple challenges confronting the continent. The launch of the Africa Sustainable Development Report 2026 provides a timely opportunity to assess where we stand, identify practical solutions, and strengthen collective action to deliver tangible results for the people of Africa. The ministerial dialogue that will follow brings together an exceptional panel of ministers, senior government officials, representatives of youth and women, development partners, and international organizations. I encourage all participants to engage in an open, forward-looking, and action-oriented discussion, sharing experiences and innovative approaches that can help accelerate sustainable development across our continent. I wish to express our sincere appreciation to the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, the African Union Commission, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and we are joined here by His Excellency Getetti, the Under-Secretary General and Executive Secretary of UNICA, and the United Nations as well Development Program, and all partners whose collaboration has made today's event possible. I thank you all for your presence and wish you a productive and successful meeting. According to the program, we are supposed to start by opening remarks with our dear sister, Under Secretary General Cristina Duarte. She unfortunately cannot join us in person. She was supposed to join us virtually, but in absence of this, her statement is going to be read by our dear brother, Mr. Jean-Paul Adam, Director, Policy, Monitoring and Advocacy in OSA. So the floor is yours, my dear brother.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Ambassador Idris, Your Excellency the Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Your Excellency the Deputy Secretary General, the Chair, Your Excellency the Chair of the 12th session of the African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, Your Excellencies, ministers and heads of delegation, and dear colleagues, partners, and friends. I am reading this statement on behalf of Under Secretary General Cristina Duarte. The United Nations Office of the Special Advisor on Africa is pleased to co-organize this year's Africa Day event with the African Union Commission, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, the United Nations Development Programme, and the African Development Bank. I would like to also extend our sincere thanks to the African Union Permanent Observer Mission to the United Nations for hosting us at today's event. This year's Voluntary National Reviews remind us where the 2030 Agenda stands with less than 5 years of implementation remaining. Many African states have reported real progress, yet progress against SDGs has also stalled or in some cases reversed, and countries have reported the same constraint year after year. The gap between the resources a country holds and the fiscal space those resources actually deliver. Today, I would like to speak to that constraint directly and offer a perspective on addressing it. The theme of this ministerial meeting is advancing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Agenda 2063 through transformative and coordinated actions. As I will soon conclude my term as Special Advisor on 31st July, I will frame my remarks around 4 years of research undertaken by the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, and what we believe offers a genuinely transformative action available to African states now, the adoption of a strategic asset management approach. In 2023, UNOSA's flagship report named a paradox that many in this room will recognize. Africa is rich in financial, energy, and agricultural resources, yet the continent continues to face debt distress, energy poverty, and food insecurity. We called this the triple paradox, and we showed how each element feeds the others. A year later, in 2024, we traced that paradox to where it was landing hardest in terms of debt. External debt across the continent had climbed past $650 billion, and in 2024 alone, debt servicing cost African states close to $90 billion. More than 40% of African countries were spending more on servicing debt than on healthcare. Even then, our report was clear that debt was a symptom rather than the underlying structural fault. The deeper constraint was an international financial architecture that African states did not design and cannot fully control. In 2025, we named that deeper constraint directly. African states do not lack resources. They struggle to fully control the flows that these resources generate. Regaining that control means strengthening country systems and public institutions, improving domestic resource mobilization, and building coherence between national, regional, and continental frameworks, such as the African Continental Free Trade Area and a reformed global financial architecture. This year, we hope to offer a blueprint to make that argument operational. If the task before African states is to control financial and economic flows, we need to assess how best to achieve this asset by asset. In our forthcoming 2026 report, we call the underlying gap between Africa's resource wealth and flow control challenge the sovereignty deficit. It is the distance between the formal legal ownership of strategic asset classes by African states and the institutional capacity to govern the economic and financial flows generated by those assets. In particular, this spans financial, natural, institutional, human capital, and technological assets. Through our research, we estimate that approximately $2.1 trillion a year moves through uncontrolled flows and missed opportunities across the continent. Of this, $678 billion is in financial assets, $200 billion in natural and physical assets, $2 billion in institutional human capital assets, and $1.2 billion in technological data and outer space assets. I want to be candid about what this figure represents, as it does not represent a shortfall of African ambition or effort. Formal legal ownership of an asset alone, without the institutional capacity to govern and capture its value for society, creates a gap in what is mobilized for development. Closing that gap is within reach, and it is the purpose of strategic asset management. Along those lines, strategic asset management contains 5 parts or capabilities. First is evaluating its strategic assets to determine their worth. Second, governing them through clear rules and accountable institutions. Third, capturing the value they generate. Fourth, reinvesting that captured value into productive transformation. Fifth, protecting each asset from capture, depletion, and alienation. Exercised as a public trust, this cycle allows a state to move from managing perceived development scarcity to managing the abundance it already possesses. We tested this approach in a concrete setting during this year's Africa Dialogue series, co-organized in May by OSA, the African Union Permanent Observer Mission to the United Nations, and various partners from across the UN and beyond. The focus was water and sanitation, a sector where the gap between physical asset and governed value is easy to see and measure. Applied to water, valuation means knowing the real worth of treatment plants, storage infrastructure, and distribution networks, not merely their construction cost. Governance means clear institutional responsibility across the full life cycle of every asset. Capture means collecting the tariff and value that a well-run utility can generate. Reinvestment means channeling that value back into that asset. Protection means treating water infrastructure as a national balance sheet item rather than a project output, so that a change in government or a shock to the budget cannot erode it. Water is one asset among many, and I want to be clear that the same five-part approach applies across sectors. We recognize the scale of what we are proposing. Institutionalizing strategic asset management requires foresight capacity within government structures that many states are still building. It requires financial governance reform, more efficient public expenditure, better tax systems, stronger domestic financial asset mobilization, and sustained work against illicit financial flows. None of this happens by ministerial declaration alone, and we do not pretend otherwise. In closing, allow me to reflect once more on the theme of this meeting. To be transformative, we need African states to move from managing scarcity to managing abundance, valuing, governing, capturing, reinvesting in, and protecting the assets they already hold, rather than searching for resources they do not have. To be coordinated, we need discipline applied at every level within national institutions, across regional frameworks, and within a reformed international financial architecture that works with African states rather than around them. This is what the Strategic Asset Management Framework offers us: a transformation in posture and coordination across levels in service of the sovereignty and prosperity that Africa's people deserve. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, dear brother Jean-Paul Adam, for sharing with us the statement of Her Excellency USG Christina Duarte, whom we would like to express our deep thanks and appreciation to her for her commitment, for her cooperation with the African Union Commission, and for her fruitful work for the interest of Africa since she assumed her office. Let me now turn to our distinguished DSG for her keynote address, Her Excellency Amina Mohammed, the Deputy Chairperson. So the floor is yours, our dear sister.
Thank you so much. Your Excellency, my sister Salma Malika Hadidi, the Deputy
the Deputy Secretary General.
It's okay. Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, and we are so proud of her. She's our leader on the continent, especially when it comes to women's leadership. His Excellency Fabrice David, the Junior Minister of Agri-Industry, Food Security, Blue Economy and Fisheries of Mauritius. Of course, ably represented by Jean-Paul Adam. Thank you for reading the speech. My sister Christina Duarte, and I really want to appreciate her leadership, her commitment to Africa every day of her mandate over the last few years. His Excellency, of course, my brother Mohammed Idris, the permanent observer of the African Union to the UN, ministers and heads of delegation, and let me underscore the women leaders that I have the pleasure of meeting who are here in this room today. Excellencies, sisters and brothers, distinguished guests. It's a pleasure to be back in this room. It's my home, and I thank the African Union Observer Mission, Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, ECA, UNDP, and the African Development Bank for convening us once again. Africa Day is where the high-level political forum hears the continent speak for itself. This year, that voice is stronger than ever. 19 African countries are presenting VNRs from every sub-region at every stage of development, each one opening its books to the world. I want to congratulate all 19 for their submissions. A voluntary national review is an act of leadership, and I want to commend Egypt presenting their 4th VNR and Togo their 5th. Excellencies, this morning we also launched the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report, produced jointly by the African Union, the African Development Bank, UNDP, and ECA. And I want to recognize Clava Gatite, I think I see you in the room this morning, who has been active throughout the week. This is the 9th in the series and focused on the 5 goals under review at this year's forum: water and sanitation, energy, industry and infrastructure, cities, and partnerships. I've looked at the reviews and the Union's own assessment under Agenda 2063. And this report, side by side, 3 messages come through all of them. And I'd like to share them to frame our discussion today. The first message: access is spreading, but quality is the promise we have yet to keep. The gains Africa has made are significant, and we should say so and celebrate them. Progress is recorded in 12 of the 17 goals. Basic drinking water now reaches 81% of our populations, up from 56% in 2013. Electricity access has risen from 46 to 53% since 2015. Mobile networks now cover almost 93% of our population, and connectivity is opening doors for digital services across the continent. For our young people, that connectivity can be a bridge to education, to enterprise and decent work, but only if it is affordable, reliable, and matched by the investment skills that are needed. However, quantity and quality do not equate, and if we hold ourselves to that standard, as we should, a different story emerges. For water that is safe to drink, coverage reaches 36% of the continent, against a global average of 70%. Only 3 in 10 Africans have safely managed sanitation, and 650 million of us lack even the basic facilities. Some 970 million Africans still cook with polluting fuels, and the smoke takes around 400,000 lives every year, most of them women and children. The disparities compound the challenge. More than 8 in 10 urban Africans have electricity. In rural areas, 4 in 10. Nearly half of our urban population lives in informal settlements, twice the global average. Continental averages can hide all of this, and gains in one sub-region can mask a reversal in another. So the VNRs convey real progress, and the report confirms it. But access to services is not enough until we see the quality of services for everyone. The second message: the gap we need to fill is in implementation, specifically financing and the capable institutions with the skills that are needed to deliver. This report says it clearly. Africa's challenge is not a lack of frameworks. The 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063 give us the vision, and they reinforce each other. In fact, the Agenda 2063 is far more ambitious than we see in the second 10-year plan, the roadmap towards that, aligned with the 2030 Agenda. What does stand between the plans and the people is fragmented implementation, limited financing, and constrained institutional capacities. Consider what the report tells us about money. Government revenue averages 23% of GDP against a global average of 32%. Tax revenue stands at about 16%. More than 20 countries are at high risk of debt distress or already in it, and borrowing costs remain out of line with the fundamentals. Official development assistance to Africa continues to fall. Annual investment in energy access runs at around $4 billion, far below the target. And all of this against a backdrop of a global environment delivering shock after shock. The instability in the Middle East has amplified food, energy, and fertilizer price volatility, with direct spillovers into African economies. The response has 2 parts, and both are within reach. The report tells us what we need to do, both at home and abroad. At home, the report points to what works: broaden the tax base, digitalize revenue collection, curb illicit flows. In Zambia, the government's bus service, for example, more than doubled non-tax revenue in 2 years, from $500 million to over $1.2 billion. Remittances at more than $104 billion have proven the most stable external flow we have. Reducing the transaction costs is money on the table. Abroad, the international financial architecture must change. Sevilla gave us the reform agenda, and member states have launched the Borrowers Platform, a way to negotiate from shared strength rather than alone. But also let us congratulate the African Development Bank that has put on the table the African finance architecture that must be addressed. Financial institutions working hard together to access the $1 trillion to $4 trillion that exist of African money outside of the continent. So this is all there to be used, and let us use it. Beyond this, there needs to be expanded concessional finance, debt relief that restores fiscal space, and member states meeting their promise on climate finance. The report calls these prerequisites, not extras. The third message: Africa's accelerators are African. The report names regional cooperation as a powerful accelerator, and it is. A continent trading with itself through the African Continental Free Trade Area, pooling energies across borders, building shared infrastructure and regional value chains is a more competitive and more resilient continent. But integration must translate into real opportunities for women traders, entrepreneurs to access larger markets, and for young people to move from education and training to decent jobs and livelihoods. The African Union's membership of the G20 gives Africa new leverage in rooms where the rules on debt, climate finance, and trade are written. And the report is clear that turning that seat into results depends on coordinated African priorities consistently advanced. This morning, I attended the roundtable on the inequalities panel, the International Panel for Inequalities, that was led by South Africa at the G20 together with Brazil and with Spain. This has huge opportunities for us to address the inequalities on the continent and globally. 41 African countries now have statistical legislation meeting international standards, and 39 are implementing national statistical plans. The 19 reviews before this forum are supported by these systems. If we cannot measure the investment outcomes that we get, then there is a lot of missing people in the results. This was made clear in Addis, and I'm glad that we will hear from my sister, the Deputy Chairperson, this morning. Excellencies, together, these three messages point one way. Africa does have a vision that is still representative of the people's aspirations. Africa is building the tools, but this cannot be done without peace. At the center is silencing the guns. We welcome the efforts and the opportunity the latest opportunity that we've had for peace on the continent, led by Algeria and Mali. Without peace, we cannot get sustainable development. It'll be difficult to achieve, but we need the foundations of lasting democracies, of governance, to ensure that peace holds when we find it. The UN is ready to support and accompany you, our resident coordinators and country teams, with the technical expertise behind national priorities. And while we deliver the promise of 2030, as the President of the General Assembly said yesterday, using football as an analogy, much can be done in the last minute of a game. Many goals can be scored. We are thinking beyond 2030 at the same time, and Africa should not be a chapter in somebody else's draft. Africa must hold the pen and inform the global narrative. And that means ensuring that we have women and young people at the table where these continent, a future for all Africans. I thank you.
Thank you very much. in the Africa House. Most welcome to all ministers. Honorable ministers, we are honored to have you. And now we are going to have another important keynote address by Her Excellency Ambassador Salma Malika Haddadi, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission. The floor is yours, Your Excellency.
Excellency, my sister, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, thank you very much for your kind words, and I would like to thank you for embodying women's leadership and African women leadership at the global stage in such exemplary and bold manner, but also for your leadership and legacy when it comes to the Sustainable Development Agenda. Thank you very much. Excellency, Mr. Fabrice David, Chair of the 12th session of the African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, honorable ministers present with us this morning. In her absence, Excellency, Mrs. Cristina Duarte, USG Special Advisor on Africa, represented by Mr. Jean-Paul Adam, my brother, Mr. Claver Gatete, USG and Executive Secretary of UNECA, Excellency Ambassador Ahmed Idris, our host and AU Permanent Observer to the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen. I am very pleased to address this 2026 Africa Day at the HLPF, also marking both the launch of the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report, but also the first biennial Continental Progress Report on the second 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063. Allow me to extend the African Union Commission's sincere appreciation to our long-standing partners, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, the United Nations Development Programme, the African Development Bank, the United Nations Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, and the African Institute for Economic Development and Planning for the excellent collaboration that has made today's event possible. This annual gathering has become Africa's premier platform for a common continental voice on sustainable development, sharing experiences from our member states and strengthening our engagement and partnership with Africa's development partners on both Agenda 2063 and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Excellencies, this year's theme, which is advancing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Agenda 2063 through transformative and coordinated actions, could not be more timely. Indeed, only 4 years remain before the target year for Sustainable Development Goals, while Africa enters the second decade for acceleration towards implementing the second 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063. The world around us continues to evolve rapidly. Global economic uncertainty, climate change, geopolitical tensions, debt burdens, and constrained fiscal space continue to test African economies. Yet, Africa remains a continent of resilience and opportunity. And I would like to emphasize that Africa remains a continent of resilience and opportunity. And I think that that was really ably highlighted by Mr. Jean-Paul Adam in the statement of Madame Duarte. Africa is among the fastest growing regions globally, with a youthful population and expanding digital economies. Our challenge, therefore, is how quickly we can transform commitments into outcomes our citizens can feel every day. This is precisely why the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report and the first biennial Continental Progress Report on the second 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063 matter. These are evidence-based policy instruments that enable African leaders and development partners to understand where Africa stands and to determine collectively the actions required to place our continent firmly on the pathway of both Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2060. Both agendas are not two separate journeys. They are complementary roadmaps guiding Africa towards inclusive growth, structural transformation, and shared prosperity. The African Union Commission is particularly proud to have jointly prepared the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report together with the African Development Bank, the United Nations Development Programme, and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. A partnership that reflects our shared conviction that Africa's development aspirations can only be realized through coordinated action and integrated planning. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report represents a balanced picture. Africa continues to make progress, but not yet fast enough to meet our 2030 and 2063 ambitions. For instance, we are gaining ground in expanding access to clean water, renewable energy, digital connectivity, and regional cooperation. Yet, access to safely managed water and sanitation still lags. Energy access, particularly in rural areas, remains inadequate. Industrialization and value addition are progressing too slowly to create the jobs our youth need, and financing gaps remain among the greatest obstacles to implementation. These findings are reinforced by the first Biennial Continental Progress Report on the second 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063, which records an overall continental performance of 53% across all 7 aspirations. Strong progress has been made in aligning national plans with Agenda 2063 and advancing digital transformation. But structural transformation, productive employment, infrastructure connectivity, and sustainable financing continues to demand greater attention. The gap between policy commitment and actual delivery remains one of our greatest challenges. Both reports therefore point to the same response: strengthen domestic resource mobilization, expand climate and development finance, accelerate digital transformation, invest in sustainable infrastructure, and deepen partnerships at every level, while strengthening national delivery systems and data capacity, and protecting development gains from conflicts and climate shocks. And I think that my sister DSG has really so clearly highlighted the intrinsic link between development, peace, and stability. Excellencies, the key message emerging from both reports is clear. What is now required is faster implementation, stronger partnerships, increased investment, and collective, and the time for incremental progress has passed. This is the decade for acceleration delivery. For the African Union Commission, this means working even more closely with our member states to strengthen national planning and data systems, and to ensure that Agenda 2063 is fully integrated into national budgets and investment frameworks. At the continental level, we must accelerate flagship initiative central to Africa's transformation, including the African Continental Free Trade Area, the Programme for Infrastructure Development in Africa, the Single African Air Transport Market, our high-speed rails network, and the digital transformation strategy, but also the African Medicines Agency. These are not simply projects. They are catalysts for transformation, integration, and shared prosperity of our continent. Their implementation certainly also requires that we work more on our partnerships, resource mobilization strategies, debt sustainability, and innovative financing mechanisms and models, amongst many others. Excellencies, Africa's greatest asset is not found beneath its soil. It is found in the ingenuity, resilience, and aspirations of its people, particularly its women and youth. Our responsibility is to create an enabling environment that allows them to thrive through quality education, decent jobs, digital opportunities, and inclusive governance. And I think that we all have in mind those young sons and daughters that are innovating to adapt to their environment, and they are creating solutions. So the asset is in our youth and our children. As we launch the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report, let us recommit ourselves to turning evidence into action, commitments into implementation, and partnerships into measurable results. Together, we can build an Africa where every child has access to clean water and quality education, where our cities are inclusive, resilient, and sustainable, and where peace, security, and partnerships unlock the full potential of our continent. This is the Africa envisioned in Agenda 2063, and this is the legacy we must deliver for present and future generations. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Ambassador Salma Haddadi, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, for your illuminating speech and for your leadership. Now we go to a minister with multi-hatted ministerial capacity, His Excellency Mr. Fabrice David, Minister of Agro-Industry, Food Security, Blue Economy, and Fisheries of Mauritius. Maybe other ministerial portfolios will come after that. Of course, he is with us in his capacity as well as the chair of the 12th session of the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development. So the floor is yours, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Chair, for reminding me the challenging responsibilities on my shoulders. Her Excellency Amina Mohamed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Her Excellency Ambassador Selma Malika Haddadi, Deputy Chairperson of African Union Commission, His Excellency Mohamed Idris, Permanent Observer of the African Union to the United Nations, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, brothers and sisters, it is a great honor for me to address you today in my capacity as chair of the 12th session of the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development. Yesterday, during the regional perspectives on SDG implementation, I had the privilege of being the voice of Africa alongside the chairs of the 4 other regional forums on sustainable development. And today is my honor to take the floor once again, this time during our special event, the Africa Day at the High Level Political Forum. Today is our day. It is the day where African voices come together not only to assess progress, but to shape the future. And it is also a privilege to launch the Africa Sustainable Development Report 2026, whose evidence and recommendations will guide our collective efforts as we enter the decisive final stretch towards 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa occupies a unique place in the global sustainable development architecture. We are the only region in the world implementing 2 complementary sustainable development agendas simultaneously. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is our shared global framework with its 17 SDGs, now entering its final 4 years, and the African Union Agenda 2063, our own 50-year continental vision built around 7 aspirations and successive 10-year implementation plans. And these 2 agendas are not competing visions. They are mutually reinforcing. They are not in opposition. They are in coordination. One provides the global direction, the other reflects Africa's own aspirations. And together, they define the future we want to build. And Africa is a continent of extraordinary diversity. We are 54 countries, more than 1.5 billion people, representing nearly 19% of the world's population. We are North, South, East, West, and Central Africa. We are landlocked countries, coastal states, and island states. And my own country, Mauritius, is proud to be an African small island developing state. We represent different levels of income, different cultures, and different realities. Yet, despite this diversity, one truth unites us. Africa is one continent, one people, one future. And we want that future to be resilient, inclusive, and sustainable. Yes, we want a sustainable Africa driven by our two complementary agendas. Excellencies, the 12th session of the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, held in Addis Ababa in April this year, was convened under the theme Turning the Tide, Transformative and Coordinated Actions for the 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063. And allow me to express my sincere appreciation to the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, the African Union Commission, the African Development Bank, the United Nations system, and all our partners whose leadership, dedication, and commitment made the forum a resounding success. And the message emerging from Addis Ababa was clear. Business as usual is no longer an option. The time has come to move decisively from commitments to implementation, from declarations to delivery, from fragmented interventions to transformative and coordinated action. And the first biennial Continental Progress Report on the second 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063 records an overall continental performance score of 53% over the years 2024 and 2025. And this tells us two important stories. The first is encouraging. African countries have made remarkable progress in aligning national development plans and institutional frameworks with both agendas. Digital transformation is advancing. Institutions are becoming stronger. Human development continues to improve. Political commitment has never been stronger. But the second story reminds us that planning alone is not enough. A significant implementation gap remains between planning, budgeting, and delivery. And on the 2030 agenda, the picture is equally clear. Africa needs to accelerate progress on 12 of the 17 SDGs and reverse negative trends on the remaining 5 if we want to achieve the targets. Despite determined efforts by African countries and our development partners, progress towards the SDGs remains challenging. This reality demands greater urgency, stronger partnerships, and financing that matches the scale of our ambitions. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa's commitment to accountability is stronger than ever. Today, all 54 African countries have presented at least one voluntary national review. This demonstrates that Africa does not fear assessment. Africa embraces accountability and truly believes that what cannot be measured cannot be improved. And if you allow me, Chair, to use a football analogy, this year, 10 African nations proudly represented our continent at the FIFA World Cup. And I can see the minister from Cabo Verde. Cabo Verde. Cabo Verde remained unbeaten in their group, including against Spain, who will play the final on Sunday. Bravo, Cabo Verde. Yeah. And we are proud. We are proud of Cabo Verde and the 9 other African teams who played that World Cup. And not far from those football pitches, here in New York, another African team is taking the field. At this high-level political forum, out of the 36 countries presenting VNRs, 19 are African countries. Two African countries are presenting their fourth VNR, 11 are presenting their third, 6 are presenting their second. This is the Africa we want, an Africa which is future-oriented, an Africa which is VNR-driven, an Africa that uses evidence to assess progress, strengthen accountability, and accelerate implementation. Excellencies, the discussions in Addis Ababa identified 5 strategic priorities to turn the tide, and I will be quite quick on those priorities. First, accelerating implementation through transformative action. The solutions are known. The challenge is scaling up and delivering them faster. Second, scaling up financing for sustainable development. Domestic resource mobilization, innovative financing, debt sustainability, and improved access to affordable development finance must therefore become central pillars of implementation. Third, investing in the enablers of structural transformation. This year, high-level political forum reviews SDGs 6, 7, 9, 11, and 17. Water, energy, infrastructure, innovation, sustainable cities, and partnerships. And these are not standalone goals. Together, they are the foundations upon which resilient economies, decent jobs, food security, industrialization, climate resilience, and human well-being depend. Africa's transformation requires intensified investment in these interconnected priorities. Fourth, harnessing science, technology, innovation, and data. Digital transformation is no longer a choice. It is a powerful accelerator of sustainable development. It improves governance, strengthens accountability, expands opportunities, and empowers our youth and our women. Fifth and final, strengthening partnerships as the catalyst for success. SDG 17 is not simply another goal. It is the accelerator that connects all the other SDGs. No government can deliver sustainable development alone. No international organization can do it alone. No financial institution, no private sector, no civil society organization. Success depends on stronger partnerships at every level. Ladies and gentlemen, today as we launch the Africa Sustainable Development Report 2026, let us not see it simply as another report. Let us see it as a roadmap, as a source of evidence, as a guide for better practices, and above all, a call to accelerate implementation. Excellencies, brothers and sisters, Africa has the youngest population in the world. Africa possesses immense natural resources. Africa is rich in innovation, entrepreneurship, and human talent. Africa has the vision. Africa has the roadmap. What we need now is accelerated implementation, stronger partnerships, and financing that matches our ambition. In closing, as chair of the 12th session of the Africa Regional Forum of Sustainable Development, I call upon all stakeholders, African governments, the United Nations system, international financial institutions, development partners, the private sector, and the civil society to renew their commitments and intensify cooperation during this decisive final stretch to 2030. If we act with urgency, with solidarity and determination, Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2063 will not remain aspirations on paper. They will become a reality for the 1.5 billion Africans we serve, and a powerful contribution to a more prosperous, resilient, and sustainable world. Allow me to conclude with these words that I have shared before about being African. I said it earlier this year in Kampala. I said it once again in Addis Ababa. And today in New York, I say it once again. I am not African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me. I thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister Fabrice David, for your insightful, uplifting speech. And thank you for ably chairing the 12th session of the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, in addition to your multi-ministerial capacities. And indeed, if Africa can do great in soccer, definitely can do great in sustainable development. Now we go to before we proceed to the ministerial dialogue, we will have the official launch of the Africa Sustainable Development Report 2026 by remarks from UNICA, followed by remarks from UNDP, and we're starting by remarks by His Excellency Under Secretary General, Executive Secretary of United Nations Commission for Africa, His Excellency Mr. Clavier Gattetti. The floor is yours, my brother.
Yeah, thank you very much, my brother. DSG, DCP, Your Excellency Minister, for actually wonderful speech, and our leader for the Africa Regional Forum for Sustainable Development. Yesterday you did a great job, and I think today you exceeded what you said yesterday. Thank you very much, really, for that. So, Excellencies, dear colleagues, permit me to stand on established protocol. It is a privilege for me to join you today for the Africa Day at the High-Level Political Forum and for the launch of the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report, a report that comes at a defining moment for Africa and the world. The global context in which we meet is both sobering and demanding. Less than 5 years remain to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, yet the world is confronting a convergence of crises: geopolitical tensions, rising debt burdens, climate shocks, slowing growth, declining development assistance, and widening financing gaps. The global SDG financing gap has now reached approximately $4 trillion annually for developing countries. The instability in the Middle East has further intensified uncertainty, disrupting trade routes, increasing energy and food price volatility, and placing additional pressure on developing economies, including those in Africa. Recent UN assessments warn that these disruptions are amplifying inflationary pressures and raising borrowing costs precisely when many countries can least afford them. And yet, despite these formidable headwinds, Africa is not retreating. It is adapting, innovating, and moving forward, as mentioned before. A few months ago, leaders gathered in Addis Ababa under the theme, as mentioned by the minister, Turning the Tide, Transformative and Coordinated Actions for the 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063. The message was unequivocal. Africa is determined not merely to manage a crisis, but to drive transformation. It is in this global and continental context that the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report provides both a timely assessment of where Africa stands and a clear direction for the journey ahead. Indeed, the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report confirms that Africa has made significant strides. We see that progress echoed in the 19 African countries presenting voluntary national reviews at this high-level political forum. Their experiences inform us that even in the midst of multiple global shocks, Africa continues to advance. They also reinforce a clear message: the time for delivery is now. And indeed, across the continent, tangible gains are visible in infrastructure development, digital innovation, renewable energy expansion, regional integration, and access to services. But the report also delivers a candid message: progress is not fast enough. Financing constraints, infrastructure deficits, climate impacts, conflicts, and debt service pressures continue to slow implementation. The gap must now close. The gap we must now close is not an ambition gap, but an execution gap, as mentioned by previous speakers. Because what good are commitments if they do not change lives? What value is a target if it does not, for example, create jobs for our young people, or connect farmers to markets, or provide clean water and electricity for families? The imperative, therefore, is to transform our plans into policies and action, and that will lead to tangible results for our people. Fortunately, Africa enters this next phase with one extraordinary advantage. Today, Africa is home to more than 1.5 billion people, as mentioned, and by 2050, our population is expected to reach 2.5 billion, and more than 1/4 of humanity will be African. This is one of the greatest opportunities of the 21st century, but demographics alone will not create the prosperity Africa seeks. The question is, will we transform this demographic growth into the economic dividend, or will we allow opportunity to become vulnerability? The answer depends on the choices we make and the actions we take today. First, we must strengthen implementation capacity. Strong institutions, reliable data systems, and accountable governance remain essential to delivering results at scale. Second, we must mobilize the resources needed to close the financing gap. The Sevilla commitments provides renewed momentum for debt sustainability, domestic resource mobilization, and reform of the international financial architecture. Africa must continue to advocate for a system that lowers the cost of capital and recognizes our development realities. Third, we must accelerate regional integration through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. A fragmented Africa cannot industrialize at the pace required. A connected Africa can become a global growth pole. Fourth, we must harness technology and innovation. Artificial intelligence, digital public infrastructure, frontier technologies, and modern data systems can accelerate progress across multiple SDGs simultaneously. Africa has the potential not merely to adapt technology, but to shape its future applications. And fifth, we must place climate resilience at the center of development planning. This is why Africa welcomes Ethiopia's selection to host the COP32 in Addis Ababa in 2027. The COP represents a generational opportunity for Africa to elevate its priorities on climate finance, adaptation, green industrialization, and sustainable growth. As such, the road to Addis Ababa must be the road towards implementation. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the central message of the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report is ultimately one of possibility. Africa possesses the world's youngest population, as mentioned. It has the world's largest free trade area. It holds enormous renewable energy potential, and it has demonstrated resilience in the face of repeated shocks. So we know Africa can achieve transformation. What remains is whether we can move with the speed, scale, and coordination required. Meeting that challenge will require capable institutions and committed partners. That's precisely where the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa will continue to stand with our member states. We remain committed to supporting member states by advancing domestic resource mobilization, implementing the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, promoting sustainable industrialization, strengthening data systems, and improving evidence-based policy making. Together, we can work to ensure that this report becomes a blueprint for delivery, one that accelerates implementation, unlocks financing, forges stronger partnerships, and ensures that Africa contributes not only to achieving the SDGs and Agenda 2063, but to shaping the future architecture of global development itself. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, USG Claver Gattetti, Executive Secretary of UNICA, for your insightful remarks, and thank you for the valuable support UNICA is providing to the African Union Commission and to the African Group in New York. Let's now move to another important remarks in this official launch by our dear sister, Ms. Isata Day, Deputy Assistant Administrator and Deputy Director of the Regional Bureau for Africa in the United Nations Development Program. The floor is yours, my sister.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellencies, DSG Amina Mohamed, and again, Excellency Ambassador Idris, Your Excellencies, Salima, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, and friends. It's a pleasure to join you once again for Africa Day at the high-level political forum. This day has become an important tradition for Africa, a moment to reflect, learn collectively, and reaffirm our shared determination to deliver on the premise of the 2030 Agenda 2063. This year's theme, advancing the two agendas through transformative and coordinated actions, speaks directly to the moment we are in. Africa is not short of ambition, as we just heard. The continent has Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. We have goals, the national development plans, regional integrated frameworks, the African continental free trade area, climate commitment, but also growing body of voluntary national reviews showing how seriously countries are engaging with the development agenda. The question before us is no longer about ambition alone. It is about translating ambition into delivery. Water and sanitation system that works, energy that powers homes and enterprises, infrastructures that connect people and markets, productive cities, and partnerships that unlock opportunities at scale. This challenge is precisely what the Africa Sustainable Development Report 2026 highlights. It shows progress in policy alignment, institutional reforms, digital transformation, and human development, but also achievement we should recognize and build on. It's not also reminding us that the space of change remains insufficient, especially in structural transformation, productive employment, and infrastructure connectivity, climate resilience, domestic resource mobilization, and peace and security. The reports also point to the implementation gap, planning, budgeting, and delivery. Fiscal constraints, services pressures, statistical and data gaps, and climate-related shocks are making acceleration harder. These challenges reinforce the urgency of translating policies commitment into finance, measurable, and locally delivered outcomes. This is why this Africa Days matters. It gives us an opportunity to move beyond stock taking and ask, what will it take to accelerate implementation now? From UNDP perspective, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, three shifts are essential. First, we must treat review processes as instruments for delivery. Voluntary national reviews should not only report progress, they should help countries identify what is working, what needs to be improved, financed, and scaled. Voluntary local review can also bring evidence closer to where implementation happens. Second, we must go deeper in identifying the real constraint to acceleration. Too often, we see symptoms like limited fiscal space, fragmented projects, data gaps, climate shocks, or even uneven local delivery. The binding constraint may lie deeper in institutional mandate, financing system, coordination failure, but also regulatory barriers or disconnect between national plans and local implementation. Without deeper diagnostic, we risk multiplying the activities without accelerating outcomes. Third, We must harness our collective efforts around those constraints. Fragmentation is not natural. It slows delivery, weakens accountability, but also spread finance thinly and makes it harder for countries to move from plans to results. The responses must therefore be more integrated. Financing institutions, data, partnership, and local delivery system need to work together around country-owned priorities. This is where portfolio approaches become important, not as another layer of process, but as a way to bring actors and instruments together around systems that matters: water, energy, cities, infrastructure, jobs, resilience, and regional value chains. The civilian commitment also gives us an important opportunity. Its success for Africa will be judged not only by global commitment, but also whether they help countries expand fiscal space, strengthen institutions, build investable pipeline, mobilize finance, and deliver outcomes. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and dear colleagues, this is why UNDP's supports countries across Africa in integrated financing, sustainable development acceleration, governance, local development, but also digital transformation, climate action, inclusive growth, and structural transformation. Connecting evidence to action, plan to financing, national ambitions to delivery, and partnership to measurable results. As we reflect on the Africa Sustainable Development Report 2026, let us treat the report not only as a mirror, but also as a compass. It shows where progress is being made, where gaps remain, and where collective action must now focus. As we move from HLPF to implementation, let us be guided by a simple principle. Africa's development agenda does not need more fragmentation. It needs coherence, courage, and delivery. UNDP remains committed to working to this journey with African countries, the African Union, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and thank you again, my dear brother, the Office of the Special Advisor for Africa, the African Development Bank, and all partners represented here today. Let us use this Africa Day not only to reaffirm our ambition, but also to deepen our collective action. The promise is clear. The urgency is real. The time for delivery is now. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Merci beaucoup and parabéns. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my dear sister, Ms. Aissata Day, Deputy Assistant Administrator of UNDP, for your important remarks and for the valuable role of UNDP as a development partner in Africa. Actually, now my role and my task as a moderator has come to an end, and this session has come to an end, and remains just to thank all our distinguished speakers and distinguished presence, and to invite our speakers to a photo opportunity in front of this podium to mark the launch of the report of the 2026. Happy Africa Day and best wishes to everyone. Thank you very much.
We will be starting the next session immediately, so thank you to everyone for taking your seats.
Hearing you. We appreciate.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Please take your seats. Thank you. We welcome once again all of our ministers and heads of delegation. We thank the speakers of the previous session. And we will start immediately because we are running a little bit late, and we want to make sure to give time to all of our ministers and heads of delegation to make their remarks. We thank you all for your patience. You will kick us off, right? I will hand over to you now. Yes. So I'm joined, allow me to introduce myself once again. I am Jean-Paul Adam, and I'm the Director for Policy Monitoring and Advocacy at the United Nations Office of the Special Advisor on Africa. I take this opportunity to welcome all ministers, all heads of delegation. I am joined by my colleague from the African Union, Ms. Boto Bayandi, who is the Director, and I don't have a full title right now, but I'm sure she will introduce herself. But she's the Director for the strategy aspect of the African Union Commission. And I will hand over to her, who will lead us through the first part, and we will be co-moderating today's sessions. And thank you so much to you all for your patience.
Thank you very much, my brother. And good morning, colleagues. Excellencies, allow me to stand in the established protocols and introduce myself as Boto Kibabonye Bayendi, Director in the Office of Strategic Planning and Delivery at the African Union Commission under the Cabinet of the Chairperson and responsible for the implementation of Agenda 2063 and its alignment to the UN SDGs and other continental frameworks. This morning, Excellencies, we are gathered here during the Africa Day for a reflection of the theme Advancing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Agenda 2063 through Transformative and Coordinated Actions. The theme mandates each one of us to be conscious of our role to coordinate better for desired transformation to advance the two agendas, the UN SDG. For us to do that, we need to pick the lessons of what should this coordination look like. We dub it the two agendas, one framework, as we went on implementing and picking up learnings. In the execution ground, it is no longer two agendas. It is one framework. The ambition for joint implementation has a solid political backing dating back to 2018, with the joint implementation commenced through the signing of a framework by the former AU chairperson and the UN Secretary General. The framework provided practical platform for collaboration around 9 strategic areas, which include advocacy and awareness. The key, do Africans know their agenda? Do rich men of Africa know that they have to commit to this agenda? Do the youth know they have to commit to this agenda? Awareness is key, reflecting on the vision of an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens and representing a force in the global arena. I want us to take back to the engagement throughout the HLPF to say the youth in the room, with the demographic dividend being what it is, you are the drivers of Agenda 2063. And if we are talking joint implementation, it means that there is no SDGs without effective implementation of the 2 agendas. The joint implementation, as I talk to the 9 themes, one of them is data and statistics, integrating monitoring and evaluation, the aspects of human rights, the aspect of development. And the key question we had during the evaluation in 2024 of the first 10 years is, had we implemented the themes that our 2 utmost political leaders committed to, where the results of the first 10 years of Agenda 2063 be where they are? And even more fresh is the results of the Africa Sustainable Development Report that you'll be sharing. Had we been jointly implementing as per this framework, would we be where we are? We have just finished the biennial report of the AU. Had we been implementing the 9 themes, would we be where we are in terms of practical results? The response to better coordination, we saw it, the UN DSG and the AU Deputy Chairperson, they responded by signing an MOU between the AUC and UNDP, among others, changing the execution environment to a college to college. And these are just a few of the many coordinating responses that we saw from our leadership. The partnership of UNECA, AUC, AFDB for the annual AFRDS and the authoring of the report we just launched is just an indication that coordinated execution would take us towards the Africa we want. In a special way, allow me at this point to thank the chairperson of ARFSD 12 Mauritius for the consistent messaging of amplifying the continental agenda. The key coordinating milestones was the development of 5 tools and the approval of the technical working group, which is a diverse team made up of the UN structure, technical experts, and the AU technical expert, AFDB, to be able to co-create at planning, at programming, so that we land jointly at member states. Allow me at this stage to say the implementers of the 2 agendas, the joint implementation, and therefore the better execution of the continentals and the global strategy are our member states. I want to give 3 hints of what member states need to be conscious of. Member states need to be conscious of the line of sight that we have, if I may cite it bottom up, the sub-national plans, the national development plans, the regional plans. And in this conversation, regional plans, we are talking about our SADC, not regions as in Africa, Asia. So for the Africa we want, that we set by the vision, need to be a force to reckon in the global arena. For us to showcase of it at the HLPF, first, we must take care of the national plans, the sub-national plans, the regional plans, and in that way, our presence in the global arena will be defined. The second messaging is that we need a balance where, as we celebrate the presentation of the VNRs at the stage, we also reflect into how many of us reported to the AU. Are we having instances of where a member state would come and present at global level But at continental level, we are not receiving the report. That is one area of concern. The other area of concern is that inclusivity. If indeed the agenda is to be driven by its own citizens, with the demographic dividend that we talk about, youth, are they present? Women, are they present? Are we taking care of our overall landscape, including our governance landscape? Are our leaders showing up with the excellence that we need, with the acceleration that we need? Lastly, allow me to say that member states should be conscious of the toolbox that we have in coordinating them. Our member states aligned at ministerial level. Does one ministry know the thematic area, the ratifications that are still outstanding from them? I want to give an example of our AFCFTA. AFCFTA is one out of the 15 flagship projects. We celebrate it alone, but it has to coexist or be balanced with other flagship projects. Free movement of people. While we are still building infrastructure, in Africa, people move with goods, goods move with people. So if 54 member states have ratified AFCFTA, but not ratified free movement of people, only 7 have, it means the gains of what we agree around AFCFTA will never be realized until all other flagship projects are invested upon and well executed. I think I've exceeded my time, but I just wanted to give a view and weight to member states that the Agenda 2063 and the UN SDGs are not competing. We need to have a balance at Parliament where the Parliamentary Committee on SDGs is also taking care of Agenda 2063. To the UN, we are saying the first 10-year evaluation said to us, we need to exploit the geographic presence of the UN in our member states, which is far greater than the AU presence. And the offices of the UN are supposed to serve jointly the mandates of Agenda 2063 for our continental strategy to be the behind-scene force that we will showcase at global level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, my sister Boto, for having framed so comprehensively the work that is before us. And I will very shortly hand over to my dear friend and colleague Charles Wangadia for his more detailed presentation. But I would just like my colleagues to present a very brief slide on our screen to demonstrate the importance of some of the work that we are undertaking jointly together. In terms of the African Union Commission and the United Nations system, we have sought to reflect all of the voluntary national reviews by different African countries. And this tool will be available for all countries to consult very, very soon. And in particular, what we are demonstrating through this tool is, and to echo the remarks of all of the previous senior speakers, in terms of how African countries are being ambitious, but also realistic. And if we can perhaps look at a particular country example, and we can see that we're looking at Tanzania, we will see that in that context, we see the progress that a country such as Tanzania has made. We sometimes underestimate the progress that is actually happening. If we look at a country such as Tanzania, rapid increase in terms of electricity access. There is also increased water access, a focus on energy security as an engine of growth. There is a connectivity revolution, which is both in terms of physical infrastructure and digital infrastructure, while there is also a commitment to reshaping the economic geography to be able to build on the hub opportunities, while looking at the climate resilience pathway. But critically, one of the factors that needs the most attention is fiscal self-reliance. And this is the way in which African countries can mobilize domestic resources, particularly because what we are seeing is that African countries broadly, apart from those in conflict, are seeing improved access, water, sanitation, energy, education. But in many instances, this is being driven by debt spending. Now, what this means is that the progress towards Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030 is sustained, but structural economic transformation has not yet kept pace. And we see this in the voluntary national reviews. And if we can just scroll down just to give you this very quick, what we have also mapped is the priorities that have been reflected in the voluntary national reviews, just using again Tanzania as the example. You see a very good identification of the key issues, taking a whole of nation plus approach. These are the number of times they are mentioned in their voluntary national reviews, a focus on fiscal self-reliance and a focus on climate resilience. So thank you very much to my colleagues for having demonstrated this, and we will share this with all countries as a tool for advocating further on the priorities for African countries. With that brief introduction, allow me to now go to Charles. And Charles, if you can be as brief as possible to make your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Director Adam, and thank you very much, Director Boto. I'll try as much as possible to be very brief, since we already have the presentation amidst us. I'm trying to project it on the screen. Okay, all right. No, good morning, distinguished ministers, excellencies, and partners. It's my pleasure on behalf of the AUC, UNECA, and FDB to present the key highlights of the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report. The report, like earlier mentioned, has been a joint effort by UNECA, AUC, and AFDB. So it basically, sorry about that. Yes, there we are. Sorry about that. So, like I mentioned earlier, it's a joint effort of the four institutions. The overview of the report basically is highlighting Africa's macro and economic development context, and then the insights on the 5 SDGs that are under review, and then insights on shaping Africa's development. In terms of context, ladies and gentlemen, development of the continent is constrained by financial gaps, weak institution capacity, economic and climate shocks. And of course, the other aspect that we have to take into consideration is the fact that the prolonged conflict that are taking place on globally could affect Africa's development trajectory, depending on the level of import dependence, exposure to Middle East and global markets, and then the geopolitical and religious affiliations. So there is therefore need to have a shift, moving beyond reactive and episodic recovery towards equitable, innovative, resilience, and coordinated long-term transformation. When it comes to a quick look into progress of the the SDGs in 2025, we noticed that Africa is progressing in 12 out of the 17 SDGs. 9 out of these 17 goals show 53% improvement in 2025 compared to 2024. Regression is witnessed in SDGs 7, 11, 12, 13, and 15. And of course, data availability remains a challenge in terms of monitoring these SDGs. For the SDG on ensuring the availability and a sustainable management of water and sanitation for all, one of the key insights is that growing pressure from population growth, urbanization, and climate-related shocks is very clear. We have seen progress in access to basic drinking water, which is masking slow gains in safely managed services. The levers for accelerating progress here, we are looking at the elevated political focus on water and sanitation, which has high impact on the sectors. And we also notice the African Union Africa Investment Platform, which is estimated to have around between 10 to 12 billion in terms of commitments annually. When you look at sanitation, we see that in 2025, Safely managed sanitation stood at 24%, and in 2023, it stood at 30% globally. And the consequences of this is that we see that around 650 million people in Africa are without basic sanitation services. Open defecation still persists in that area. When it comes to safely managed drinking water, we see that access to safely managed drinking water stands globally at more than 70%. But when it comes to Africa, you see it in 2015, it's at 33%. 2023, it is at 36%. So basically, in terms of water quality, treatment, and efficiency, we are lagging behind as Africa because domestic wastewater that is safely treated still stands at only 33%. In terms of ensuring access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all, we see that energy access and generation gaps constrain social services and productive sectors. We also see that rural areas are significantly underserved. And the levers for accelerating progress here, we are looking at energy investments, which demonstrate how policy and partnerships are driving Africa's energy transition. We also have a few examples here, like, for example, Kenya. Kenya has expanded geothermal energy in the Rift Valley. Morocco with the Noor solar complex. Ethiopia and Rwanda have decentralized solar mini grids and off-grid systems for rural electrification. When it comes to access to electricity, we see that there is a very big gap. Global electricity access has increased from 87% in 2015 to 92% in 2023. When it comes to Africa, the progress has been modest. We only notice a 46% increase in 2015, and for 2023, it stands at 53%. So we see that really there is very slow movement in access to electricity. And here we also notice that nearly half of Africa's population still lacks access to electricity. When it comes to clean cooking, this one is also critically still standing low, with access to clean fuels technologies for cooking in 2023 only standing at 34%. And this also has an impact on health. Household air pollution is causing an estimated 400,000 premature deaths annually. When it comes to building resilience infrastructure, promoting inclusive, sustainable industrialization, and fostering innovation.
Charles, I'm sorry, because of the time, I suggest if you can try to wrap it up in maybe about 2 minutes.
Yeah, we also see very little progress in terms of this SDG with connectivity, digital connectivity, which is actually standing out with 92.8% of the African population now being in a position to access connectivity. When it comes to making cities and human settlement inclusive, safe, and resilient and sustainable, we also see that there is little progress that is taking place here. So strengthening the means of implementing and revitalizing global partnerships, we see that domestic resource mobilization in terms of tax to GDP ratio for Africa stands at 16%. The OECD is standing at more than 35%. In conclusion, the insights that are shaping Africa's sustainable development future are highlighted here. We are saying that transformational integrated action is essential to close Africa's SDG implementation gap, and closing the financing gap is a prerequisite for accelerating progress. Regional cooperation offers a powerful accelerator for structural transformation. Investment in advancing policy and plan implementation is crucial. Scaled up and better alignment, international finance is critical to sustaining development gains, and investing in data institutions and inclusive governance underpins effective implementation. With that, thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wangadia, for the technical presentation. Excellencies, we are now getting to the part of interactive interventions by excellencies. Allow me to announce that we have French and English interpretation if you need the services. The rules of the game is that as we invite speakers, we are limiting interventions to 4 to 5 minutes. Regrettably, we would not want to do that to our ministers. We also, from the African perspective, to say that kids are not supposed to stop an adult on the floor speaking. So we believe that that consideration would dictate how we progress. We, in the overall, ministers would like to hear the best practices from your specific country, the common challenges, the transformative concrete actions that have demonstrated. This is an indoor peer learning engagement that everyone who takes the floor should be able to share what the other can take for a betterment of the execution of both agendas. A number of us were presenting the VNRs during this HLPF. We will give priorities to countries looking at their next meetings and so forth. At this stage, excellencies, allow me to invite to the floor His Excellency Professor Mkumbo, Minister of State, President's Office, Planning and Investment of Tanzania. So, Excellency, you have consistently, as Tanzania, demonstrated strong national ownership of the sustainable development through integration of the SDG into national planning, and your country's emphasis on inclusive growth, infrastructure, and other areas really shows that you are attempting to accelerate both Agendas 2030 and Agenda 2063. Please share with us the key lessons learned and the challenges encountered, and how your country prioritized this accelerating the implementation for the Sustainable Development Goals and inherently Agenda 2063. Give you the floor, Excellency.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and colleagues, ministers, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to commend the African Union Commission, UNECA, UNDP, and all partners for convening this very important meeting. For Tanzania, one of our most valuable experience has been the preparation of 3 voluntary national reviews. The first national review enables us to introduce the SDGs into our national development planning frameworks, and the second one strengthened institutional coordination and stakeholder engagement, and our third one, which we presented yesterday, represents a transition from reporting progress to accelerating implementation towards 2030, while simultaneously laying the foundation for Tanzania Development National Vision and the 5-year development plan. From experience, I wish to highlight 5 main lessons that we can share with our colleagues. Firstly, is the institutional ownership. Institutional ownership is essential. The VNR should never be viewed as a UN reporting exercise. In Tanzania, it has been treated as a national development management tool. Our National Planning Commission coordinated the process, bringing together various government and non-state actors, including government ministries, local government authorities, the National Bureau of Statistics, parliaments, DPs, academia, civil society, and the private sector. So this whole government approach and whole society approach strengthened our national ownership and ensured that the findings directly informed our planning and our budgeting processes. Secondly, integrating the SDGs into national planning makes implementation easier. Rather than implementing the SDGs separately, Tanzania mainstreamed them into our national development architecture. Our VNR is fully aligned with our national development vision and our 5-year development plan, ensuring that the SDG priorities are reflected in sector plans, public investment programs, and annual budgets. Thirdly, broad stakeholder participation improves both quality and accountability. Compared to our previous VNRs, the 2026 VNR involved significantly broader consultations. For example, we engaged government institutions. We were able to involve local government authorities, 185 of them, over 800 civil society organizations, more than 1,000 private sector companies, youth organizations, academia, and the UN system, of course. This ensured that the report reflected experiences of citizens rather than just a government. Fourthly, investing in national statistics systems is indispensable. One clear lesson here is that the VNR cycles depends very much on good data. So evidence is key here. Fifthly, VNR should become an implementation instrument, and that the VNR is not just a report, but its value lies in how government use the findings to improve policies. The challenges that we see, some of them, first, for example, despite the improvement that we see, data gaps remain a real challenge. And secondly, coordinating multiple institutions in government and private sector also remains quite a challenge, both technically and financially. Thirdly, capacities across local government remain even. For a country bigger like ours, with more than 108 local government authorities, coordination becomes a big issue, especially when it comes to quality of data. Fourthly, the global shocks that we all know have also presented as a very big challenge. And fifthly, as all of us have pointed out here, is the question of the financing gap. This remains a major challenge. Going forward, I think that as African countries, we should focus on strengthening our national statistical systems, institutionalizing all government and all society approaches, ensuring that the VNR findings directly influence national planning and budgeting, strengthening peer learning among African countries, like previous speakers have pointed out, mobilizing innovative financing and stronger partnership to accelerate implementation. As I close, Madam Chair, our experience shows that preparing success VNRs is not simply about reporting progress. It is about strengthening institutions. It is about improving policies. It is also about enhancing accountability. And most importantly, it is about ensuring that development planning translates into better lives for our people. And therefore, SDGs and the reporting mechanisms become part and parcel of our own national development and planning processes. Tanzania remains committed to working with fellow African countries to share experiences, learn from each other, and accelerate the implementation of both Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2063, ensuring that no one is left behind. Madam Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, and particularly for outlining the need for measurement and that VNRs are not just reporting, they are a development tool. And thank you so much for sharing these experiences with us. J'ai le plaisir maintenant d'inviter son Excellence, Monsieur Samir Abdelhafid, le ministre de l'économie et du plan de la Tunisie, de partager avec nous le parcours de la Tunisie à travers vos revues volontaires nationales, d'identifier les défis, mais aussi bien les opportunités dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre des objectifs de développement durable, l'agenda 2030 et l'agenda 2063. Votre Excellence, Monsieur le Ministre.
Merci beaucoup. Permettez-moi tout d'abord de remercier tous les initiateurs et les organisateurs de cette journée consacrée à l'Afrique, mais et mettant l'accent sur l'importance d'actions transformatrices et coordonnées pour avancer dans les agendas 2030 et 2063. Pour la Tunisie, le 3e rapport national volontaire permet de partager plusieurs pratiques qui peuvent être adaptées à d'autres contextes. Premièrement, la préparation du rapport national volontaire s'est appuyée sur un cadre méthodologique commun associant l'ensemble des institutions concernées, un outil standardisé de collecte des données et une analyse des interactions entre les ODD grâce à l'outil SDGs Énergie. Cette approche permet de mieux identifier les priorités nationales, les synergies et les arbitrages nécessaires. Deuxièmement, la Tunisie a placé les collectivités territoriales au cœur du processus de développement à travers une démarche ascendante depuis le niveau local et régional jusqu'au niveau national. Les examens locaux volontaires, et aujourd'hui nous avons finalisé un examen et on est en cours de finalisation de 4 autres examens locaux volontaires. Ces examens constituent à cet égard une expérience promoteuse qui renforce l'appropriation locale des ODD et favorise des politiques publiques mieux adaptées aux besoins des territoires. Troisièmement, notre expérience montre que les politiques relatives à l'eau, à l'énergie, aux infrastructures et au climat doivent être conçues de manière cohérente et intégrée. Les investissements dans le dessalement et la réutilisation des eaux usées, ainsi que les réseaux électriques intelligents et les énergies renouvelables, illustrent cette approche particulièrement pertinente pour les pays comme la Tunisie, confrontés au stress hydrique et aux effets du changement climatique. Quatrièmement, les programmes consacrés à l'insertion des jeunes, au soutien à l'entrepreneuriat innovant, notamment à travers le Startup Act, ainsi qu'au renforcement de la protection sociale grâce au registre social national, montrent qu'il est possible de concilier croissance économique, inclusion sociale et réduction des inégalités. Cinquièmement, l'ODD 17. L'ODD 17 demeure un levier essentiel car la mobilisation des partenariats publics-privés, la coopération internationale, l'implication de la diaspora et notamment le renforcement des capacités nationales de financement constituent des facteurs déterminants pour accélérer la mise en œuvre des ODD. En définitive, la principale bonne pratique que la Tunisie souhaite partager n'est pas un projet isolé, mais une méthode dont les principes sont une gouvernance participative, une planification fondée sur les données, une approche intégrée des politiques publiques et un engagement fort des acteurs nationaux et locaux. Nous sommes convaincus que ces principes peuvent être adaptés à des contextes très différents et nous sommes prêts, Excellences, à partager notre expérience avec tous nos frères africains. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Excellency, especially what soothes me, and I believe the youthful persons in the room, is the priorities you bestow upon youth and startup programs. So I believe the peers in the room would look up to you for more. At this stage, Excellencies, allow me to give a chance to the Minister of Finance, Mozambique, Her Excellency Mrs. Carla Alexandra Oreste de Racio Loveira. Excuse me for butchering the name. Excellency, it is your time.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, moderators, excellencies. On behalf of the government of Mozambique, I would like to start by addressing special thanks to the UN also the African Union for gathering all African countries in this continental debate on the SDGs. The celebration of Africa Day at the HLPF this year constitute an important occasion for us to discuss the main challenge facing Africa member states in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Agenda 2063. The launch of the Africa Sustainable Development Report presented today comes at a moment when the relationship between Africa's continental agenda and the global 2030 framework is not merely complementary, it is decisive. How African countries integrate the aspirations of Africa Agenda 2063 with the targets of Agenda 2030 at the national and local levels will determine whether either agendas deliver meaningful change by their respective horizons. Mozambique experience is that this integration is both possible and essential. For sharing some experience of Mozambique, we have to say that both agendas are fully integrated into our 20-year national development strategy and the government 5-year program, which emphasized the need to commit with the agriculture, infrastructure, and the industrialization targets. Our planning frameworks, budgets, allocation, and monitoring system are structured around the shared priorities of sustainable and inclusive development that both agenda defines. We contribute biannually to the continental ISDR reporting process, and those contributions inform our national planning cycles in return. Excellencies, Mozambique on July 10th presented our second voluntary national review to the HLPF, which the most comprehensive SDG accountability exercise we have undertaken. What makes it distinctive is that it incorporates for the first time the voluntary local reviews from 6 districts and municipalities integrated under the principle of one territory, one process, one product. That local national integration is precisely what both Agenda 2030, 2063 requires if their targets are not to move from national strategy into actual communities. I want to be direct about the constraint that binds both agenda most tightly. Its financing and debt burden. African countries implementing ambitions, national strategy under Agenda 2063 and 2030 simultaneously face borrowing costs that bear no relation to our reform efforts or our development potential. Mozambique removal from the FATF grey list reflecting measurable progress on transparency and macroeconomic integrity has not translated into fair sovereign risk pricing. So the ISDR must speak clearly to this, and the international financial architecture as currently structured must to define the ability of Africa to finance its own development agenda and the reforms of what architecture is a prerequisite for delivery. Mr. Chair, to conclude, Mozambique will continue to deepen the integration of both agendas at the national and local levels, to invest in subnational accountability architecture that makes that integration real, and to advocate for the finance conditions that make it possible. We look forward to the findings of the ISDR 2026 informing both continental and global deliberation, and we encourage that its recommendation on finance and institutional capacity be taken up not as aspirations, but as operational commitments by development partners and multilateral institutions alike. I thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Minister, for particularly situating the challenge of financing and rising debt burdens in African countries at the center of the conversation, and also recognizing that this is a fundamental issue of fairness of the international financing system, and also in the way in which African countries can access that system. We will be interacting throughout our session, hearing from ministers, but also from representatives from civil society, from youth. And our next speaker, I have a pleasure to go to Ms. Nima Lugangira, the Secretary General for Women Political Leaders. And we'd like to hear from you, Nima, from the perspective of women leaders and women's political participation. What unique role can women and girls play in accelerating the implementation of the SDGs that we are looking at today? And what actions are needed to ensure gender-responsive leadership for transformative sustainable development across Africa? Nima, over to you. In less than 5 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. Allow me to begin with a question. If Africa has already identified what must be done through Agenda 2063, through the SDGs, through the different national development plans, and countless of review processes, why are we still off track? I believe the answer is not lack of knowledge. It is the gap between political commitment and institutional accountability. Too often, we celebrate the voluntary national reviews, APRM reports, and regional declarations, but we ask too few questions afterwards. Did those recommendations influence the next national budget? Did they shape public investment decisions? Were they translated into legislation? Did parliaments actually debate them? Did parliamentary committees follow up on their implementation? Because unless the answer to these questions is yes, then reports will remain reports. They do not necessarily become development outcomes. And from my experience, working at community level, civil society, parliament, I have learned that implementation succeeds when evidence drives political decisions. Governments coordinate implementation, but parliaments transform commitments into legislation, budgets, oversights, and hold government accountable. As Secretary General of Women Political Leaders, I know firsthand the role that women plays and why women matter in accelerating the SDGs. Women and girls are disproportionately affected by many of the challenges that we are discussing, from gender-based violence, access to education, food and nutrition insecurity, and climate change to water, health, and poverty. Women political leaders therefore bring essential perspectives to budget decisions, to legislative reform, to oversight, and to experiences that many women and girls take at the grassroots levels. And therefore, women are critical in helping ensure that implementation reaches those furthest behind. Excellencies, if I may leave with one recommendation today, it is this. Let us redefine the purpose of our review mechanisms. Voluntary national reviews, APRM reviews, voluntary local reviews, and other accountability processes should not end with reporting. They should trigger political action. And with this, I humbly ask Excellency Ministers present to ensure that all accountability architecture that their governments attend, they must make space for at least 2 members of parliament, one of whom should be a woman, at least to start off with. Their recommendations should systematically inform national investment decisions, annual budgets, legislative priorities, and parliamentary oversight. Only then will we be able to move from measuring progress to actually delivering progress. And finally, let us recognize that implementation is not only a government responsibility, it is a shared responsibility of government, parliaments, women at grassroots level, civil society, private sector, regional institutions, and without forgetting the youth. When evidence informs policy, when policy is backed by budgets, and when budgets are matched with oversight, and when institutions are held accountable, implementation becomes inevitable. That is how we will accelerate Agenda 2030 That is how we will realize Agenda 2063. And before I conclude, I wish to sincerely thank the ECA, UNECA, for paving the way of making sure that parliamentarians are engaged on regional discussion, Africa regional discussions of sustainable development goals, because it is parliamentarians who are representing the communities. And at the end of the day, SDGs are there to make the lives of our people better. And these people are at community level. And therefore, distinguished guests, distinguished delegates, excellencies, if we want to build the Africa we want, we must make deliberate decisions and take deliberate action to making sure that the VNR reports and other accountability mechanism reports that our governments are presenting, they will be held accountable and they will be translated into action that will result into making Africa better for all citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam, and more clear and voluminous in your submission is that it doesn't just go by ticking the box and celebrating at our checkpoints. We should be held accountable to say what we committed after we appreciated our baseline. Next time, we should start with that. How far did we go in implementing the recommendations of all our reports? At this time, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to usher in the Minister of Economy, Planning and Regional Integration from Guinea-Bissau. Excellency, your peers are in the room. Share with them the experiences of Guinea-Bissau in the implementation of the SDGs Agenda and Agenda 2063 in the journey towards sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam, honorable ministers, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to begin this statement with the customary greetings and to congratulate you on the excellent organization of this high-level political forum on sustainable development, which serves as an important platform for dialogue, the sharing of experiences, and the strengthening of our collective commitment to the 2030 Agenda. I would like to inform you that Guinea-Bissau now has a new national development plan for the period 2026 to 2035. This important strategic tool is fully aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals and reflects the country's strong commitment to inclusive, sustainable development, focus on the well-being of the people. Despite the economic, political, and social challenges faced during the implementation of the development plan, Guinea-Bissau has made significant progress in several key areas, especially in energy, infrastructure, social protection, social reforms, and human capital development. These results are ones we would like to share with you. In the energy sector, we have made important progress with the supply of clean energy from the OMVG, benefiting the city of Bissau and several regions of the country. The investment is a major step towards spending access to sustainable energy and improving the living condition of our population. At the same time, the government has been strongly investing in the modernization of national infrastructure through the construction and rehabilitation of roads, hospitals, and other essential facilities, with the aim of improving access to basic service, promoting economic development, and strengthening the well-being of the population. We are also preparing to hold next month
the referendum of the new constitution, as well as the elections already scheduled for December this year, with the aim of restoring institutional and governance stability in the country. To this end, we will continue to promote a permanent, inclusive, and constructive dialogue with all national stakeholders. Madam Chair, what Africa needs is partnership and investment for sustainable development and long-standing injustice. And let us chart our own paths forward. We share analysis, we share vision, and we share strategy for our continent. What we need is action. History has taught us that united, there is no limit to what Africa can achieve. We must remain united as we implement the Agenda 2063 and the African Continental Free Trade Area. We own it to ourselves, we own it to the future generation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency Minister, for outlining particularly the steps you are taking on the governance dimension, which is an integral part of the Voluntary National Reviews, and linking this as well to the fairness of support for African countries. We will now, and thank you for your patience, ministers, I would now have the pleasure to invite His Excellency Mr. Mohamed Abdirahman Sheikh Farah, the Minister of Planning, Investment and Economic Development of Somalia. Your Excellency Minister.
Thank you very much. Thank you, co-chairs, excellencies, distinguished ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thanks the African Union, the UN Economic Commission for Africa, the UN Office of the Special Advisories on Africa, the UNDP and other organizers. I'm very happy to join you today for this important African Day at the high level political forum for ministerial meeting. And also I just want to congratulate on the launch of the Africa Sustainable Development Goals 2026. The report comes at an important moment as Africa has only few years remaining to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals while advancing the 2063 agenda. Somalia has presented yesterday the second voluntary national review, and we are very happy to report that Somalia has progressed, made some very good progress in terms of the security, access to education, reducing the poverty 15%, and other areas in terms of water and other human rights and gender issues. For Somalia's Sustainable Development Goals begins with strong national institutions, national ownership, and long-term planning. Somalia is now implementing its National Transformation Plan, which has 4 pillars. It strengthens public institutions, improves planning, monitoring, and accountability. The NTP creates the conditions for inclusive economic growth. Our priority is not simply recovering from fragility, but it is building resiliency and transforming our economy. So the priorities, one of the main priorities is transforming the economy, promoting private investment, creating jobs, improving infrastructure and productivity, building climate resilience, which is to integrate climate resilience into the planning, also strengthening food security and investing in drought resilience and sustainable livelihoods. Also, Somalia wants to strengthen the partnerships, aligning the development cooperations with our partners with the national priorities. It's very critical for us. Also, we wanted to improve coordination, focus on measurable results, and mutual accountability. Africa's development challenges are shared. So are our opportunities. We need Africa to stress stronger regional cooperation, greater domestic resource mobilization, increased investment, knowledge sharing, and a strong implementation capacity. In my final closing, the next 5 years must be defined by implementation rather than commitments, by strengthening institutions and also investing in our people and working together as African nations and with our partners. We can accelerate progress towards both Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for bringing an interlinkage of aspects of productivity and implementation capacity, which changes the narrative to say, much as we lack resources, are we optimizing what we have? At this stage, I would like to introduce the next speaker, the Minister of Environment, Climate Action, Energy of Cape Verde, His Excellency Mr. Carlos Varela, to share the experiences, to outline challenges, and to give us more light onto what could Africa do better to accelerate implementation of both agendas. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good morning. Thank you very much. Excellency, it is a pleasure for Cabo Verde to participate in this ministerial meeting. I would like to thank the Office of the Special Advisor for Africa, Union African Commission, and all the partners for bringing us together to discuss how we can accelerate implementation of both Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2063. For Cabo Verde, sustainable development is not an abstract concept. It is a daily necessity. A small island development state, we face increasing climate risk, prolonged droughts, limited freshwater resource, and high dependence of the imported energy. These challenges have taught us the important lesson. Water and energy must be addressed together. We know that integrated solutions deliver better and more sustainable results. A clear example is the close relationship between these two sectors. Currently, about 90% of Cabo Verde's drinking water is produced through desalination. We need to make energy reliable, affordable, and increasingly renewable as is essential to ensure about our water security. Electricity production depends on the fossil fuel, and Cabo Verde, given the high price of this resource based on the reflection of international markets, especially related to the conflicts, it makes a huge fraction on the budget state, because we cannot pass all this difference to the citizens because the condition economic is not so high. Renewable energy until now represents less than 25% of the energy production. For this reason, expand renewable energy is not only energy policies or international policies. It is related to the climate change. For us, it is necessary because it is also water security policy, it is climate adaptation policy, it is social inclusion policy, and as well, it is an economic resilience policy for Cabo Verde. This integrated approach is reflected in our national strategies, and it was presented in the third Voluntary National Review for Cabo Verde. but the other of the most sign of determination and engagement of this new government that take over less than 1 month in May 2000 this year, 2006, to take real leadership and commitment and mobilize resource and implementation support for solving these issues. And we create a special ministry including these 3 areas and interlinking the natural resource, water, sanitation, climate change, and the energy. Our experience since independence on 1975, let me mention that Cabo Verde was classified by UN as inviolable country. Demonstrate us that it's not possible to overcome the challenge and the goals for SDG alone. But our determination and our certainty that we are able to do good things and provide good conditions for our people is fuel to make these goals achieved. No one can believe in us if we don't have the determination that we can do best for our country. The progress we have made has only been possible through strong partnership with the UN nations system, regional institutions, development partners, and implementation financial institutions. Another lesson is that cooperation must be adapted to reality nationally. Our experience shows us that strong regional partnership combined with national ownership and long-term political commitment can significantly accelerate progress and the broader 2030 agenda. Looking ahead, Cabo Verde will contribute to the 2030 agenda by demonstrating that even a small island development state can transform vulnerability into resilience through strong institutions, a just energy transition, continue to invest in national reforms and capacity building, and effective international partnership. At the same time, we can build a transformation for a huge agenda for 2063. Taken in the tubarões azuis or blue sharks, for us, they represent much more than sport success. They remind us that commitment, discipline, determination, and teamwork always matter, more than other constraints that we can face. So we can show again that Cabo Verde can make a difference. Africa can transform their reality. Africa can be transforming the economic reality and improve their people's life. Together, Agenda 2030 and Agenda for 2063 provide a unique opportunity to build a greener, more resilient, and more inclusive Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. We will be going to some voices from young people. Je souhaite la bienvenue aussi à son Excellence, Madame la Ministre du Gabon. Nous allons entendre la voix des jeunes et puis nous allons entendre aussi l'intervention de son Excellence, Madame la Ministre, et aussi le représentant du Burundi. So first, let us hear from Ms. Eugenia Boateng, the founder of the Africa Diaspora Youth Hub. Thanks for sharing a little bit the work that you have been doing, and in particular, how it relates to challenges and opportunities of implementing the SDGs in Agenda 2063.
Thank you, Ms. Bayendi and Mr. Adon. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, and fellow young leaders, it is an honor to join you in this important conversation on Africa Day at the high-level political forum. And thank you to the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa for this opportunity. I believe the unique role of young Africans and the diaspora is not simply to support Africa's development, but to help shape it. Throughout today's discussion, we've heard about investments in clean water, clean energy, industrialization, innovation, and partnerships. While these are all essential, but I would like to leave us with a different question. Who will sustain these investments 20 years from now? Because sustainability is not determined on the day a project is launched. It's determined years later by whether the people who have inherited these projects have the skills, the opportunity, and the responsibility to keep it working. A water system is only sustainable if someone who knows how to maintain it. Clean energy only transforms lives when it powers businesses that create jobs. Innovation only creates prosperity when entrepreneurs can access markets, finance, and opportunity. I'd like to agree about the statement that has been mentioned multiple times about youth being our assets. African youth are innovators. They are creating solutions that are adapting to their environments. But I'd like to take it a step further. As a young African leader in the diaspora with so many who are passionate about Africa's development, we speak of the solutions to accelerate development and stronger implementation. And we believe that the Africans in diaspora are in a unique position and one of our greatest assets. But yet that position has not yet been fully utilized. I believe the Africans in the diaspora is one of our greatest assets. But too often we define diaspora engagement by remittances. But what if investing in Africa meant more than sending money back home? What if it meant investing our knowledge, our ideas, our skills, our networks? The diaspora brings global experience, technical experience, investment relationships that can help accelerate implementation across every SDG under review. Our greatest contribution is not only what we send back home, it is what we build together. And that belief inspired Build with Africa, an initiative of the African Diaspora Youth Hub. Our philosophy is simple. Africa's future should not simply be built for Africans. It should be built with Africans on the continent and across the diaspora. That also requires us to rethink partnership. The greatest partnership under SDG 17 is not only between governments and institutions, it's also between generations. Imagine an experienced engineer mentoring a young engineer to design and maintain tomorrow's water systems. Imagine an entrepreneur opening the first door for the next entrepreneur so they don't have to start from zero. Imagine today's leaders intentionally preparing tomorrow's leaders. That is how development becomes sustainable. I'd like to leave you with an African proverb. Wisdom is like a baobab tree. No one person can embrace it. The challenges before us are too great for any one government, one institution, one generation, or one community to solve alone. But when we combine the experience of today's leaders, the innovation of young people, and the strength of Africa's global diaspora, we create something greater than any of us could achieve on our own. Together, we won't just implement the sustainable development goals. We will build the capacity to sustain them for generations to come. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much for the passionate submission. This actually draws me back to another youthful submission, Excellencies, where we were asked in driving Agenda 2063, after the decade of acceleration, if you are not bringing the youth to tables of decision-making, are you ready for a decade of political will? The youth are saying that if they are not in the decision-making tables as we deliver Agenda 2063 second 10-year, in the third 10-year, we'll be onboarding them. They'll be the new leaders, but not agreeing with what we have programmed in our long-term strategies. So let us be cautious that we need their voices now. If it is sustainable, what we are going to be doing in the third, in 2060, in 2040, we have to onboard now. Thank you very much for the passionate submission of the diaspora, that you aren't just about ditching money to Africa. If we are to be knowledge-based economies, we should be coming up with realities of, like the theme of today, how do we accelerate, how do we coordinate better, that unique proposition that the youth in the diaspora possess. I would like at this stage to invite another youthful voice, who is Mr. Ba Boka, Vice President, Pan-African Youth Union. Thank you very much, sir. The floor is yours.
Merci, Madame la modératrice. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers collègues jeunes, c'est avec un grand honneur pour moi de prendre la parole au nom de l'Union panafricaine de la jeunesse, porteuse des aspirations, de l'énergie, de l'engagement des millions de jeunes Africains. Permettez-moi de commencer par un message simple, mais essentiel. L'Afrique ne pourra atteindre ses ambitions de développement durable sans sa jeunesse africaine. Et la jeunesse africaine ne demande plus seulement à être considérée comme l'avenir, elle demande à être reconnue comme un acteur majeur du présent. Le thème de cette journée de l'Afrique, au Forum politique de haut niveau sur le développement durable, nous rappelle une exigence fondamentale, transformer nos engagements en actions concrètes, coordonnées et durables. L'agenda 2030, l'agenda 2063 porte une même vision, celle d'une Afrique prospère, pacifique, inclusive, résiliente et pleinement actrice de son propre destin. Notre continent ne manque ni de ressources, ni de talents, ni d'idées. L'Afrique possède une richesse exceptionnelle. Son capital humain, avec plus de 60% de sa population âgée de moins de 25 ans, l'Afrique possède le plus grand capital humain du monde. Notre jeunesse n'est pas un défi à gérer, elle est la solution à construire. Mais cette opportunité doit être accompagnée par des politiques ambitieuses, des investissements adaptés et une véritable confiance dans les capacités des jeunes. La jeunesse africaine n'est pas uniquement une bénéficiaire des politiques de développement, elle est une force de propulsion, une force d'innovation, une force économique et une force de paix et de stabilité. Chaque jeune entrepreneur qui crée des emplois, chaque jeune chercheur qui développe une solution innovante, chaque jeune agriculteur qui contribue à la sécurité alimentaire, chaque jeune militant qui défend l'environnement ou chaque jeune médiateur qui œuvre pour la paix, la stabilité, cible déjà la construction, l'Afrique que nous voulons. C'est pourquoi nous devons changer le regard et passer d'une logique de consultation à une logique de participation réelle. La jeunesse doit être présente dans les espaces de décision, dans la conception des politiques publiques, dans les mécanismes de financement du développement, dans les stratégies de transformation économique et sociale. Faire confiance à la jeunesse, c'est accélérer le développement. Donner des opportunités à la jeunesse, c'est renforcer les stabilités. Associer la jeunesse à la gouvernance, c'est préparer l'avenir plus juste et plus durable. L'Union panafricaine de la jeunesse réaffirme son engagement à travailler aux côtés de l'Union africaine, des Nations unies, des États membres, du secteur privé, de tous les partenaires afin de créer les conditions permettant aux jeunes Africains de libérer pleinement leur potentiel. Mais pour réussir, nous avons besoin d'une nouvelle approche, des partenariats. L'Afrique ne demande pas seulement son avenir soit décidé à sa place, elle demande à des partenariats fondés sur la confiance, le respect mutuel, la responsabilité partagée, des investissements qui répondent aux réalités de nos aspirations et de nos populations. Nous devons également renforcer les mécanismes innovants de financement, soutenir l'entrepreneuriat des jeunes, accélérer l'accès au numérique, développer les compétences et créer des emplois dignes pour cette génération. Permettez-moi de lancer un appel solennel. Écoutons la jeunesse africaine. Car une jeunesse écoutée devient une force d'innovation. Une jeunesse responsabilisée devient une force de transformation. Une jeunesse engagée devient une force de paix et de prospérité. La jeunesse africaine n'est pas seulement l'avenir de l'Afrique, elle est une partie essentielle de l'avenir du monde. Si nous voulons atteindre des objectifs de développement durable, réaliser les aspirations de l'agenda 2063, l'Afrique que nous voulons, construire un avenir commun, plus équilibré, Alors, nous devons placer la jeunesse au cœur de nos décisions et de nos investissements. Je voudrais terminer avec une conviction profonde. L'Afrique que nous voulons ne sera pas seulement héritée par notre jeunesse, elle sera construite avec elle. Notre génération est prête. Notre génération est prête. Elle porte des idées, des solutions et une nouvelle ambition. Transformons ensemble les défis en opportunités, les ambitions en résultats et les promesses en réalité pour notre jeunesse, pour notre continent, pour un monde plus juste, plus durable, plus solidaire. Vive l'Afrique. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Babokar. Et exactement, la jeunesse africaine doit être l'instrument de la prospérité globale. J'ai le plaisir maintenant d'inviter Son Excellence la ministre Madame Louise Pierrette Movono, la ministre de la Planification et de la Prospective du Gabon. Permettez-moi, je voudrais juste indiquer à tout le monde qu'après Madame la ministre, nous allons avoir aussi l'intervention du professeur Frédéric Nimubuna, le directeur de cabinet adjoint du Premier ministre du Burundi. Et après ça, nous avons l'occasion de prendre quelques commentaires de la salle. Alors déjà, réfléchissez si vous voulez prendre la parole, levez la main, comme ça nous pouvons identifier, mais ça doit être très rapide. If anyone would like to intervene after the last remaining two speakers, please raise your hand so we can identify you early. And when we do give you the floor, please be as succinct as possible. Madame la ministre, merci d'être avec nous. Je sais que vous avez dû interrompre d'autres activités, alors merci d'être avec nous. À vous la parole.
Merci, Monsieur le modérateur. Je vous remercie pour la parole et je m'excuse en effet d'être en retard. Peut-être cela m'aurait permis de mieux apprécier le contexte dans lequel nous discutons. Et je dois dire que c'est un défi pour moi de présenter ce que j'avais préparé après les deux interventions inspirantes de nos jeunes Africains. Je pense que le contexte est important pour le Gabon, parce que je parlerai de l'agenda de développement du Gabon. Le Gabon adopte aujourd'hui une étape décisive de son développement sous l'impulsion des plus hautes autorités, et je pense que l'Union africaine a été au centre des changements qui a eu lieu dans notre pays. Notre pays s'est engagé dans une nouvelle trajectoire fondée sur une gouvernance rénovée, une croissance durable, ainsi qu'une action publique davantage orientée vers les résultats. Nous sommes à New York aujourd'hui parce que nous avons décidé de faire un examen volontaire de la mise en œuvre de nos ODD pour l'année 2026. Et cet examen volontaire traduit la volonté du Gabon d'évaluer avec transparence les progrès accomplis, mais aussi de partager les défis auxquels nous demeurons confrontés. Car le développement durable est avant tout un exercice d'apprentissage collectif qui exige lucidité, responsabilité et coopération. Cette démarche est pleinement cohérente avec la vision de Gabon 2050, donc l'exercice que le Gabon a fait, exercice de prospective, qui est lui-même aligné avec la vision de l'Afrique 2050 et le plan national de croissance et de développement 2026-2030 que nous venons d'achever. Ce plan national de croissance et de développement constitue désormais la boussole de notre action publique et le cadre de mise en œuvre des objectifs de développement durable. À cet effet, les résultats que nous sommes venus présenter illustrent les progrès réalisés, mais ils montrent également que le défi pour le Gabon n'est plus de définir son cap, mais c'est d'accélérer sa mise en œuvre afin que nos ambitions produisent des résultats concrets au bénéfice de chaque Gabonaise et de chaque Gabonais. Pour revenir aux ODD dont il faut parler ou sur lesquels nous reportons, il s'agit notamment des ODD qui ont accès à l'eau, qui ont relatif à l'eau et à l'énergie. Ce que nous avons fait au Gabon pour atteindre nos objectifs, c'est de nous assurer d'aligner de manière très étroite notre agenda de développement tel qu'il est présenté dans le plan national de croissance et de développement et le projet de société que le chef de l'État a présenté aux Gabonais et qui ont accepté cette boussole ou plutôt cette trajectoire pour les 7 prochaines années. Nous pensons que c'était une décision stratégique parce qu'elle nous permet d'avoir un alignement parfait entre l'agenda politique du pays et l'agenda de développement et nous assurer qu'il y ait une cohérence, une coordination, mais également une appropriation par tous les Gabonais de cet agenda de développement. Le premier pilier de ce projet de société et donc que nous considérons comme une base, le fondement de notre agenda de développement, c'est l'accès universel à l'eau et à l'énergie. Un besoin de services que les Gabonais expriment chaque jour et qui nécessite que nous allions très rapidement. Aussi bien en matière d'eau que d'énergie, le constat est clair. Oui, nous avons fait des progrès, mais nous avons toujours une différence entre l'accès en milieu urbain et l'accès en milieu rural. Nous avons également un gros problème relatif à la vétusté et à la maintenance de nos équipements. Et lorsque la représentante de l'African Diaspora Youth Hub discutait, je me voyais en effet le défi auquel le Gabon est confronté. Pendant longtemps, nous avons investi sur nos infrastructures, aussi bien en matière d'eau qu'en matière d'énergie. Mais nous n'avons peut-être pas fait suffisamment d'efforts pour entretenir ces équipements. Aujourd'hui, nous nous retrouvons dans la position où nous devons entretenir les équipements qui sont obsolètes, mais en même temps mettre en œuvre de nouvelles installations parce qu'il y a l'accroissement naturel de la population. Aussi bien en matière d'eau que d'énergie, le besoin est là de trouver, surtout en matière d'énergie, le mix énergétique qui va répondre le plus à nos conditions en tenant compte effectivement de notre capital naturel, mais également, et ça il faut le dire, de notre contrainte par rapport au service de la dette. La mobilisation de ressources pour atteindre cet agenda de développement reste extrêmement important. Le prochain ODD auquel nous nous sommes attardés est le 9 relatif à l'industrie et aux infrastructures. Et là, dans le cadre du plan national de croissance et de développement du Gabon, nous avons décidé d'avoir 3 domaines de concentration. Le premier, c'est la transformation locale de nos minerais, en nous concentrant notamment sur le manganèse et le fer. Nous voulons les transformer localement parce qu'ils sont susceptibles de créer des emplois et de créer de la valeur pour la croissance économique du pays. Le deuxième domaine de concentration est relatif à notre souveraineté alimentaire. La première étape étant l'arrêt d'importation d'un produit que les Gabonais consomment à grande échelle ou la limitation de son importation du poulet de chair. Et là, nous voulons nous concentrer sur toute la chaîne de valeur pareillement pour créer des richesses. Et enfin, le troisième domaine de concentration, c'est la valorisation de notre capital naturel. Autant de domaines de concentration qui nous donnent l'opportunité d'accélérer le mécanisme d'industrialisation de notre pays. Et c'est là-dessus que nous allons travailler au cours des prochaines années. Les villes restent également au centre de notre agenda parce que le Gabon reste un pays majoritairement urbain. Les questions d'assainissement, les questions de sécurité sont centrales dans notre agenda de développement et nous sommes en train d'accélérer notre politique ou notre stratégie de décentralisation en créant des pôles de développement dans différents pays. Le troisième ODD sur lequel le dernier, sur lequel nous nous arrêtons aujourd'hui, c'est l'ODD 17 sur les partenariats. Cela a été dit. Personne ne peut y arriver seul. Et pour nous, au Gabon, cette plateforme n'est pas seulement une opportunité de présenter ce que nous avons fait, mais également de discuter, d'échanger avec des pays qui probablement ont à apprendre du Gabon, notamment à tout ce que nous avons fait en matière de finances climatiques. Nous en avons parlé dans cette salle hier avec l'OIF, mais également apprendre d'eux. Parce que nous pensons que les 5 prochaines années, oui, ce sont les 5 prochaines années dernières années des objectifs de développement durable, mais c'est également les 7 années charnières de notre agenda de développement. Nous savons que les dons ne seront pas suffisants pour pouvoir atteindre les objectifs de notre agenda. Nous pensons qu'il nous faut un mix et nous y travaillons dans notre stratégie de développement. Nous pensons notamment aux ressources propres, nous pensons au fonds climatique, nous pensons aux obligations vertes, nous pensons au partenariat avec les banques de développement. C'est toute une architecture sur laquelle nous voulons travailler et nous voulons nous engager avec les autres pays de la région. Je dirais donc en conclusion que cet examen volontaire nous permet de mesurer le chemin parcouru, mais surtout d'identifier avec lucidité les actions que nous devons mener pour accélérer et atteindre les objectifs de développement durable, tout en concrétisant les ambitions du plan national de croissance et de développement 2026-2030 du Gabon. Au-delà des indicateurs, les indicateurs sont importants, mais il y a des réalités vécues par nos populations partout dans notre pays, notamment parmi les plus vulnérables. L'attente est immense. Elles ne nous demandent pas davantage de promesses ni davantage d'indicateurs. Elles attendent des résultats, des réponses concrètes et des changements perspectives dans leur quotidien. Et c'est pour cela, comme je l'ai dit, que nous sommes ouverts à tout échange, tout retour d'expérience, tout partenariat susceptible, en marge de cette rencontre, de renforcer notre action et d'accélérer l'atteinte de nos objectifs. C'est cette exigence qui guide désormais l'action du Gabon et nous sommes prêts à apporter notre contribution à cet agenda, aussi bien avec des institutions spécialisées au sein de l'Union africaine que des Nations unies, avec notre diaspora. Je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre, surtout d'avoir fait l'effort d'être avec nous et pour cette intervention très appréciée. Et je demande à tous les intervenants si vous pouvez aussi partager avec nous vos textes qui seront bien sûr utilisés pour approfondir le débat. Notre dernier intervenant, et merci beaucoup, professeur, de votre patience, j'invite le professeur Frédéric Nimubona, le directeur de cabinet adjoint du Premier ministre de la République du Burundi, à faire son allocution et de nous présenter à la fois les défis et les opportunités du Burundi vis-à-vis la mise en œuvre des ODD et l'agenda 2063. Votre Excellence.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, pour la parole. Effectivement, le Burundi, comme les autres nations, est en train de mettre en œuvre les objectifs de développement durable ainsi que les aspirations de l'agenda 2063 de l'Union africaine. Le Burundi, en ce qui concerne les ODD, vient de produire et présenter le deuxième rapport. Le premier rapport a été produit en 2019 et a été présenté en 2000 lors du contexte de Covid. Et le rapport de l'agenda 2063 de l'Union africaine vient d'être produit et présenté. Il figure parmi le rapport continental. Alors, les objectifs du développement durable et les objectifs ambitieux de l'agenda 2063, les moonshots, sont complémentaires, intimement liés. C'est pourquoi je vais présenter les résultats de manière globale ainsi que les actions faites. Et au niveau de la mise en œuvre de ces objectifs du développement de l'agenda 2032 et l'agenda et les objectifs de l'agenda 2063, les résultats du Burundi ne sont pas tellement fameux, mais aussi ne sont pas tellement mauvais. En moyenne, les résultats tournent entre 40% et 52%. Toutefois, pour le moment, ce qui importe beaucoup, ce sont les actions faites. Si nous considérons l'objectif de développer le pilier 1, qui contient un certain nombre d'ODD, appelé développement du capital humain et inclusion sociale durable. C'est là où se situe également la première aspiration de l'agenda de l'Union africaine qui voudrait à ce que chaque pays atteigne un niveau de statut de revenu de pays à revenu intermédiaire. À ce niveau, le Burundi a fait un certain nombre d'actions. D'abord, la semaine passée, si je me souviens bien, le mercredi, la fondation Bonne Action Umugiraneza a reçu un prix qui a été remis à la première dame du Burundi pour des contributions louables en ce qui concerne la population. Au Burundi, il y a des politiques de gratuité des soins de santé. La gratuité de la scolarité, la gratuité des soins maternels et la gratuité pour l'accouchement depuis 2005. Encore une fois, au Burundi, depuis un certain temps, on produit les engrais localement et ils sont subventionnés. Maintenant, nous observons un grand accroissement de certains denrées alimentaires, surtout le maïs, le haricot et les pommes de terre ainsi que les avocats. Au niveau de l'agenda, au niveau du pilier 2, qui concerne la transformation économique inclusive et prospérité partagée, le Burundi a aussi fait beaucoup d'actions. Depuis l'année 2000, le Burundi vient d'inaugurer 5 grands barrages, y compris le barrage qu'il partage avec le Burundi et le Rwanda, un barrage qui se situe sur le Nil. Le Burundi a entamé un très grand vaste chantier d'adduction d'eau potable. Je peux vous rappeler que 46% des ménages du Burundi ont accès à l'eau potable. En effet, le Burundi, c'est un pays de montagnes où partout où pour passer, il y a de l'eau. Ça reste seulement à l'adduction pour approcher l'accès à la population. L'employabilité des jeunes. L'employabilité des jeunes. Moi, je vais tranquilliser les jeunes qui viennent de parler précédemment. Je vous rappelle d'abord que Son Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la République, a été consacré champion des jeunes. Et souvent, les jeunes se rencontrés au Burundi, autour de Son Excellence, Monsieur le Président, pour leur parler, pour lui exposer les défis. Au niveau du Burundi, Son Excellence, Monsieur le Président, a un programme qui s'appelle le Programme d'autonomisation économique et d'emploi pour les jeunes. C'est un programme qui est hébergé à la présidence. C'est un programme qui forme les jeunes à travers un centre professionnel bien doté en équipement moderne pour pouvoir faire plusieurs métiers. Et encore une fois, ils obtiennent un fonds de départ pour pouvoir commencer un business. Au niveau du pilier 3, durabilité environnementale et gestion intégrée du capital naturel. Quoique dans le rapport que nous avons présenté, les résultats ne sont pas du tout fameux, mais il y a beaucoup de choses d'actions qui sont en train d'être faites. Je peux vous dire que chaque mois de janvier, février, quand il pleut beaucoup, on plante des arbres. Les militaires plantent des arbres à travers un programme appelé Ewe Burundi Urambaye, c'est-à-dire habiller le Burundi à travers des arbres.
Professeur, si je pourrais vous demander de peut-être résumer dans 1 minute, et si vous avez un texte qui peut être partagé, nous sommes volontiers à le partager.
Bien noté.
Je suis désolé, c'est juste parce que nous avons encore une intervention après.
Je m'en vais pour terminer au niveau de surtout paix et sécurité. Paix et sécurité, Vous savez que le Burundi est un pays qui fait tout pour aider ou maintenir la sécurité dans la sous-région. Toutefois, le Burundi ne manque pas de défis. Le premier grand défi auquel fait face le Burundi, c'est l'insuffisance des statistiques, due à l'insuffisance, bien entendu, des moyens pour organiser des enquêtes. Le Burundi, bien entendu, aussi connaît une forte progression démographique. Mais comme bonne pratique, c'est que le Burundi dispose des autorités qui disposent d'une forte volonté politique en vue de faciliter la mise en œuvre des objectifs de l'agenda ainsi que des objectifs de développement durable. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Professor. We have two interventions from the room. If I could ask, I'm sorry I don't have your name, but if you could introduce yourself briefly and then make your brief statement or question, if possible in less than 2 minutes. And after that, we'll have the Pan-African Youth Union. Please.
Bonjour, je suis Corinne Tromsdorf, directrice du Partenariat français des déchets et administratrice de l'Association internationale des déchets. Je vais m'exprimer en français. Monsieur le Président, merci, Mesdames et Messieurs. Merci pour ces réflexions inspirantes partagées ce matin. La gestion des déchets n'a pas été mentionnée. Pourtant, l'ODD 11 est le seul qui la mentionne explicitement, même si une autre mention spécifique au gaspillage alimentaire se tient dans l'ODD 12. Les infrastructures de l'ODD 9 sont nécessaires pour la mise en place d'une collecte et d'un traitement des déchets efficient. Mais ces infrastructures de gestion des déchets présentent un coût en investissement initial et en entretien annuel qui reste difficile à couvrir dans les conditions d'espace fiscal contraint évoquées ce matin. Et pourtant, collecter et traiter les déchets partout et pour tous, les déchets produits aujourd'hui et ceux du passé, cela est essentiel pour protéger la santé, les ressources en eau, la sécurité alimentaire et de nombreux autres objectifs de développement durable. Il y a une fenêtre d'opportunité. L'agenda climat peut faciliter le financement de ces actions à travers l'article 6 de l'accord de Paris, en valorisant la réduction des émissions de méthane, dont 20% proviennent des déchets mal gérés. Je vois aussi que l'agenda 2063 inclut dans ses priorités à la fois la gestion des déchets et la transformation vers des systèmes circulaires qui valorisent mieux les ressources locales, créent des emplois locaux et réduisent les coûts de gestion des déchets. Le Partenariat français des déchets et l'Association internationale des déchets appellent à ce que tous les gouvernements du monde entier s'engagent dans cette double transition et à ce que celle-ci ne soit pas considérée comme un agenda environnemental, mais comme une manière de structurer
2 minutes, si vous pouvez résumer en 15 secondes.
Le développement économique et social. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup pour cette soumission très appréciée et très pertinente. I would now like to invite Mr. Latifat Odunuga from Let Us Reach Africa, followed by the Deputy Secretary General of the PYU. Mr. Odunuga, if you can raise your hand so that they can see you.
Hi, my name is Latifa. Thank you very much. My question is, can we build the Africa we want if African ways of knowing remain absent from this global decision making? And this assumption is challenged by the mindset of the people who have spaces to HLPF, high-level political forums. You and I in this room may have access today. What about the people with no spaces to this type of access? We can continue to speak about financing justice, climate and gender justice. What about knowledge and language justice? They want Africans in the room just as a checklist, inviting us repeatedly to participate in development, but yet our knowledge is considered as vague and our culture is just like, it's just another story or folktale. Let us talk about these issues as epistemic issues. This is an epistemicide, a deliberate way of killing our knowledges. development is not just about distributing wealth, it is also about redistributing our intellectual authority. And as we accelerate the SDG and Agenda 2063, I invite us to ask not only how we finance debt, but restoring the confidence in African knowledge, preserving and protecting our African languages, and creating equal space for African ways of knowing within global policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very pertinent and timely intervention. And I think that one of the key elements by which this is being addressed both by the African Union Commission but supported by the UN is also in terms of the decade of action for people of African descent and justice for African peoples, which includes the question of fairness around cultural, around the protection of culture as well as language and so forth. But thank you so much for having raised this point. We now go to our final speaker from the floor, Mr. Salahuddin Bakor, the Deputy Secretary General of the Pan-African Youth Union.
Thank you, Moderator. Excellencies, distinguished ministers, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we meet today to discuss how to accelerate the Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2063, but if we are honest with ourselves, we are not moving fast enough. Across our 54 African countries, millions of young people continue to face access job opportunities, unequal access to education and security, climate shocks, and limited participation in decision-making. Yet they are constantly told they are the future. Young people are not only the future, they are the present and they are ready. The challenge is not a lack of youth leadership. The challenge is whether our institutions are prepared to trust young people with real responsibilities, meaningful representation, and adequate investment. We cannot achieve the Sustainable Development Goals or Agenda 2063 if over 60% of Africa population remain on the margins of policy implementation. Youth inclusion must move beyond declarations. It must be reflected in national budgets, development, and also the partners to ensure that the voice of young African, they are part of the decision-making process. Let this not be another meeting where we celebrate our ambitions. Let it be the moment where we collectively decide to accelerate implementation with young people at the center. Because the Africa we want will not be built for young people, it will be built with young people. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to all who have intervened. And I would just simply like, in conclusion, to express on behalf of the United Nations Office of the Special Advisor on Africa as one of the co-organizers, our sincere appreciation to all of the partners, in particular the African Union, the African Union Commission, but in particular the Permanent Mission represented through Ambassador Idris. We'd like to express our appreciation to ECA, to the African Development Bank, and to UNDP, and all of the persons who have intervened today. I would also like to say a big thank you to the excellent interpreters of the African Union. Thank you to all who have spoken. Over to Botho, who will then hand over to our closing speaker.
Thank you very much. I sincerely would like, on behalf of the African Union, as coming from the cabinet of the chairperson and his cabinet, to say we have been having a very grateful time during the HLPF. We have sensed what member states come up to present at the global stage versus what we've been receiving in the Agenda 2063 reports. And it indeed reinforces, with the last comments being made, that for us to do better at global stage, let's take care of our backyard. A comment about the issue of languages. We have one of our aspiration, Moonshot 5, speaks of African values being explicit and promoted. And I earlier talked about the 7 aspirations, 7 moonshots. They need a balance. They all need to happen for us to show up in a positive note at the global stage. So I totally agree with you. The youth, the passionate, that it is not the leaders of tomorrow, we create our tomorrow now. We co-create tomorrow with the leadership that are existing in their youthful years. They are not leaders in waiting, because also there are a lot of changes in the atmosphere, be it technology. What they know, we don't necessarily know as adults around the decision-making tables. So I totally agree with that. In a nutshell, we would like to appreciate our partners. We would like to appreciate the member states for showing up for scrutiny. Flowing up for voluntary national reviews is basically to say, I'm willing to share experiences. I'm also willing to learn. So the humility of learning is an African virtue. And I believe the opportunity for voluntary national reviews is far much appreciated. Also, along with, let it not be a tick the box. Let us not be here again to say or describe the same problems and then suggest the same recommendations. They will always be valid because African problems are not a theory. They are real and they need solutions. For as long as they are not solved, we find ourselves coming up with one recommendation year after year. It is a stubborn problem glaring at us. Let's eliminate it so that in the next reporting, it will not feature in our report. Landing by saying it is a decade of acceleration for us. In the next 2 weeks, we are going to be having 2 executive council meetings, and we wish that the spirit of transformation, better coordination, resourcing, we carry it into the next conversation. The host, the organizers, I cannot thank you more, and most of all, the generators of the report that we were launching today. Allow me to then hand over to Dr. Balkis Osman Elasha from one of the partners, African Development Bank, the Chief Regional Coordinator, to come out to do the official closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the close of this important Africa Day gathering, allow me to express my sincere appreciation to all participants for the rich discussion, the practical insights, and renewed commitment demonstrated today. Our conversations highlighted both the progress Africa has made and the challenges that still lie ahead in our collective journey toward the sustainable development goals. We have heard valuable lessons from countries undertaking voluntary national reviews and explored pathways for accelerating sustainable development across our continent. These exchanges reaffirm a simple but powerful message. Africa's future depends not only on national action, but also on the strength of our collective regional resolve. As we look towards 2030, we must acknowledge an uncomfortable reality. We are entering the final segment of SDG journey at a time when multiple crises continue to intersect. Climate change, debt burden, food insecurity, biodiversity loss, geopolitical tensions and conflicts, and growing development financing gap threatens to slow progress in many of our countries. Yet, this is not a moment for pessimism, it is a moment for decisive action. The last mile to 2030 must be different from the path we have traveled so far. Incremental progress will not be enough. The scale of the challenge requires transformational change. And in this respect, I have 5 key messages for Africa. First, we should invest in resilience as the foundation for sustainable development. Climate change is no longer a future risk, it is today's development challenge. Every investment in agriculture, water, energy, infrastructure, health, and education must be designed to withstand climate shocks and build long-term resilience. The second message is that we need to focus more on implementation. We have enough policies, strategies, and action plans, and implementation is a must, but it has to be integrated because sustainable development goals are interconnected, and our responses must be as well. Investments that create jobs, expand access to energy, strengthen food systems, empower women and youth, and protect ecosystems can deliver multiple development benefits and simultaneously. The third message is, of course, the finance as an oil for development. And we should be realistic. We cannot speak about billions anymore. To match the real needs, we need now to aim higher, to look for trillions. And public resources alone will not close this gap. We must strengthen domestic resource mobilization, expand innovative financing mechanisms, deepen regional capital markets, and create conditions that attract greater private sector investment into sustainable development. The fourth message is, of course, the regional integration, the regional cooperation. And I know there are barriers. We speak about it, but we need to do more to remove the barriers. And it can be a very strong engine for progress. The African continental, for example, continental free trade area, the regional infrastructure corridors, shared energy markets, digital connectivity, transboundary climate solution offer unprecedented opportunities to accelerate development at scale. No country can achieve SDGs in isolation, and our success will depend on regional action and solidarity. The fifth message is about the human dimension, the people at the center of development. They are the greatest asset for Africa, people, especially young population. And we have seen the messages coming from the youth. And of course, we trust youth. They are the future of the continent. And they need to be given the chance. We need to create opportunities for them, to give them jobs, skills, innovation, and hope, of course. The final years to 2030 should not be viewed simply as a countdown to a deadline. They should be viewed as an opportunity to redefine Africa's development trajectory. By 2030, success should be reflected in communities that are more resilient to climate shocks, in women and young people who have greater opportunities, in farmers who have withstand droughts and floods, in cities that are greener and more inclusive, and economies that create prosperity while protecting natural capital. Today's discussion have shown that Africa possesses the knowledge, the institution, the partnership, and the ambition needed to achieve this vision. What is required now is 3S: speed, scale, and sustained political commitment. Let us therefore leave this forum with a renewed sense of urgency. Let us transform our commitment into implementation. Let us transform challenges into opportunities. And let us ensure that when the world reaches 2030, Africa will be remembered not as a continent lagging behind, struggling to catch up, but as a continent that demonstrated leadership, resilience, innovation, and determination in advancing sustainable development. Thank you.
We have concluded. Thank you so much. Wishing you all a very good day.